Well, let's call the order. I'd like to call to order the Berlin-Boylston Regional Transition School Committee. As always, reminder, this meeting is being recorded and your image and or voice may be broadcast. As we've called this to order, I'm going to check one last time in our Q&A to see if there were any folks who raised their hand looking to make a public comment. Seeing none. All right, we will move through our agenda. Obviously, next section is our approval of payroll and payable warrants. Ooh, struggling. Missed November. I'm going to catch up. Any issues? Everything looks good there. Anything to mention, Keith or Angela, on that portion of the agenda? Hearing none. Fantastic. Moving into section 4, our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve our consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
I second that.
Thank you both. Okay. I will take a roll call vote on that one. Angela?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Thank you all. Okay. We are cranking here. Let me just take a quick note here for 1 second. All right. Item number 5 on our communication for this evening is our farewell to Mr. Laporte. As you can all see, I took a drive through Berlin today. I almost didn't make it to Cliff's house. I saw a bunch of deer on my way there, and I get challenged. Sometimes I just want to pull over. I can't help myself, but I made it there. And, I'll just quickly, I'll let everyone say any comments that they'd like, but just quickly on just the behalf of, myself, Cliff, when I joined, I was quickly thrown into the mix as it relates to working with Cliff on our subcommittee to hire our current superintendent. So that was sort of my first one-on-one experience with Cliff. And after a few stops in some coffee shops and a number of caffeinated drinks, it was a pleasure to work with Cliff. His professionalism and his experience was top notch. And then, as well as I transitioned here into the chair over the past year, Cliff has been a terrific mentor to me and has always been someone I can lean on and ask for advice. So I just want to thank Cliff for that. And, just some thoughts and, Cliff's work as our chair during our regionalization project was, extremely impressive, extremely professional. He's always a top class individual. And, on behalf of me, I want to personally thank you, Cliff, for all you did for me and for the time that you have spent. I was told you were appointed to the committee February of 2015. So almost 6 years, Cliff. So, and on behalf of the committee, you'll see that we presented Cliff with a beautiful jacket with his name on it and our district emblem on there. And he's proudly wearing it tonight, which I'm happy about because I was meant to take a picture of it to send everybody and I forgot. So thank you, Cliff. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say before we give Cliff a minute?
If I could just add, kind of mirroring what Jim had said, Cliff, I think that, your ability through the years to be able to, not only be the voice of the school committee, but with your experience, you were also able to bring in a perspective from an administrative standpoint, as well as from a teacher standpoint. And, oftentimes, we as administrators don't see that too often in school committee members. And it really sort of, I think, grounded the transitional process that we've seen the school committee go through. So I just want to thank you, on behalf of the administrative team and the teachers, I just would like to thank you for your perspective and your dedication to the district.
Yeah, I'll just toss in that in the short time that I've been on the committee, uh, Cliff has always been great to talk with, and he's always got well articulated, thoughtful insights to share at key moments. I think it's well timed input, and I have always appreciated that, Cliff, and we'll miss having that at the table. Your particular brand.
Thank you.
And of course, I've loved working with you, Cliff. I remember when you answered my Facebook plea and we chatted on the phone about school committee. You have just been a godsend, and everyone has already said it all. Your leadership has been, unmatched, and I've been on the committee for a while, and I'm just grateful for all your years of service, and I'm certainly going to miss you like everyone else. So thank you so much.
Cliff, I also appreciate you meeting with me. I believe it was like a year and a half ago. And that meant a lot. I thank you for that. And I'll never forget that. You're a good guy, and you'll be terribly missed by everybody. So thank you for all your service.
Thank you. Nice.
And I just wanted to add that it was actually because of Cliff that I decided to pursue the open position on the school committee. I had worked with him on the superintendent search committee, and everybody said it so well. It's between his leadership, how well spoken he is, how human he is. He's so, you're just sweet and wonderful, Cliff. And you have a nice way of coming across. And I met you and I just thought I want to be a part of something that he's a part of. It must be a good thing. And I'm very sad to see you go. I'm sad that I had a short time with you, but I'm so grateful for it.
I'm gonna wait for you, Jim, to tell me when I can talk.
Yeah, Cliff, the last thing I'll say that, the way you, captained us and led us, particularly as we moved from our past superintendent into our new superintendent, and led, sort of the idea for building on and, just strengthening the relationship between the school committee, administration, staff, and teachers, right? And I think that's something that we can, give yourself a lot of credit for, is that, you helped get us into the position where we are to have such a great working relationship across the board. Because there were some times prior to that where there were challenges, and I think you most importantly helped lead us during those times. So, you've set us up really well for the future. So I'll pass it on to you now, Cliff.
Well, okay, so you can't see it, but I'm blushing. So thank you for all your kind words, everyone. It's been an honor to be on this school committee. Even over the years, as the members of the committee have changed, the thing I've been struck by is that no matter who joins the committee, there is a desire to work collaboratively, to listen to each other, and to support the superintendent, whoever the superintendent is, to make the schools a better place. And, as a former principal and public school teacher, I certainly encountered school committees along my way that didn't look anything like this committee. They were committees where there was so much tension in the air and so many agendas that I don't even know how those committees functioned. But this has not been that kind of committee in my nearly 6 years, and I am grateful for that. And I have met some really terrific people, and that is a blessing in and of itself. I'd also like to say something about the leadership team. Jeff is new, so, he's he leads a great group of people. I met Karen and Carol and Paul and the principals before I met Jeff. And I was impressed right from the beginning about the good-heartedness, the welcome, the love of children and education that exists in all these people. And to top it all off, the hard work and the hours that they put into the job. As a former administrator, I know what those hours are like. And I want to thank them as well for the work that they do for the school community. And it was a pleasure getting to know them better over these last 6 years. And I can always say when people ask me about the schools, and I have had the occasion through my real estate career to help people buy homes in our school district, I'm always able to say that this is a great place for kids to be. And then I can talk about what the specifics of that are. So thank you all very much. I am humbled by your comments. I am grateful for the time we spent together. But I'm also grateful for the time that I will not be spending with the school committee starting next month. It's been great. I don't regret a moment of it. You've all been terrific, and thank you for the kind comments. I appreciate that. And I love my jacket. Love it.
Looks good, Cliff.
Thanks.
Cliff. Any other final comments before we move on? I don't want to keep Cliff too late on his final meeting. I'm sure he's.
Oh, I can wait a long time on my final meeting.
Well, fine. Then I just would like to add, since we can hold Cliff up, Cliff, I greatly respect the work you've done. You've been an advocate for the schools that's respected in the towns, and you've helped deliver the message of what's going on in the schools clearly and in a way that the town respects. We'll certainly miss that. We appreciate the support you've provided for the schools. Personally, I've appreciated the interactions I've had with you on a variety of topics. And I know Lori said something about SWEET, and that's great. I think you also, though, are firm and standing, up for what you believe in is best for schools. We've had, debates and dialogues and school committee meetings and other places about that. And it's always been a collegial discussion, and that's been a great thing to watch as an administrator in these school committee meetings.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Bob.
And Cliff, I don't want to make you blush anymore. I'll probably give you a call tomorrow, but I do want to say, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have made it through my first year, and I'm being absolutely sincere about that. And here I am, January, it'll be 3 years. So.
That's great. Glad you're here, Jeff.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Cliff. But as they say, the show must go on.
Yes, it must.
So we will continue through our agenda, and let me just take a quick note here. Okay. The next section of our agenda obviously is with Cliff's departure after tonight's meeting, is we'll have an open board seat for the time frame of January 1st through our election in May. So from a process standpoint, as we move into this, before I introduce Mr. Totman, from a processy standpoint, I've reminded the committee we had, for lack of better terms, advertised, promoted the open seat in a number of areas. We have received, to this point, only one candidate. So Mike Totman will be the only candidate we'll be discussing the open position with tonight. So in terms of the process standpoint, just for Mike and committee, we will, Michael, first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you introduce yourself, explain, just introduction, why you're interested in the open seats, any other thoughts that you want to share with the committee. Then we will allow committee members to ask any questions of you that they might have. I'm going to ask the committee members first to share their questions before I have any questions or any follow-up questions. From that standpoint, we do, as a rule, all deliberations are done in public. So you get to sit there and kind of see how we discuss the open seat and your potential to fill that open seat. And the voting as well is done in public as well. So we will vote. It'll be a roll call vote. It is a majority required vote to appoint you to the seat. Just because the seat is open does not, and you're the only candidate, does not mean technically that you automatically get the seat. It does require a roll call vote and a majority vote. If you are appointed, you will take your seat at our next school committee meeting. You will be required between now and then to go visit the town clerk and be sworn in. I'll let the town clerk know, but we'll cross that path when we get there, assuming everything goes well. And then you would be appointed at our next meeting in January. Are there any questions from the committee as it relates to procedurally this evening? Okay, Mike, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. Everybody all the committee members have been shared your letter of interest as well as the resume you provided. So they've all had that, but I will pass it off to you.
All right, thanks. Yes, so Mike Topman, I was interested in this position when I saw it come up. I've been in town here, my family, for about 7 years now, and we've just wanted to take a more active role in the town. And with our oldest daughter starting kindergarten this year, I felt like this was a great opportunity to get more involved with the town and with her, especially in school, make sure she gets the best opportunities that she can, and as well as her classmates. As far as my background, where I am, I work in real estate, just like Cliff, I guess, with Bridge in town here. I've been in real estate for about 11 years, mostly start off as a part-time project with my own investments and whatnot, and now sales. I also have a regular day-to-day job. I work for a hedge fund administrator. They're a global company. I'm in their learning and development department, so we create training for new accountants, managers, leadership, all different types of training, software specific, job specific, leadership skills, communication skills, things like that. So I've been doing that for about 10 years. 10 years before that, I started in financial services as an accountant. So that's a little bit about my background. I'm definitely open to answering any questions that you might have.
Do we have a way of doing this, Jim?
Thank you very much. No, I mean, there's no, I guess what I'll do is I will, why don't I just, start asking each committee member, in order in an effort to kind of keep it under control. What I'll do is I guess I'll start with the Boylston side of it, and I'll ask Lori, if you have any questions, maybe you could kick us off.
Sure. I just wanted to say your resume is extremely impressive. Really, I noticed that you're a very capable and strong leader, and that's really helpful. I also know that as a school committee, we work together as a team, and I'm curious how you would approach working together as a team. One of the things when I first came on was taking some of my perspectives and kind of putting them on the side and listening to the community, and also listening to the committee itself, and kind of weighing everything out. I'm wondering how you feel you'll fit coming as a team member, and then also with, when things don't match what you personally feel versus how the public feels.
I missed that last part, Lori. Could you repeat that last part?
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess, so my first part, I guess my question would be how you feel as a team. And then also, one of the things that I like about this school committee is that we're very varied and we're very different, but we all seem to work together very nicely. And one of the things that I've had to really learn being here is some of my positions personally might not match what is best for the school or what the school committee feels is best or necessarily what the community feels. So I'm wondering, when your personal views don't match that, how do you see yourself reconciling that?
Right. So as far as teams go, I've been a part of teams almost my entire life as a child, playing teams at work. We work in teams. We have a global team at our job. We have 7 people across 4 different countries and geographic areas. So we work pretty well. We've been doing Zoom before Zoom was a thing. So as far as collaborating with teams and having different opinions of different team members, trying to teach a team member in India how an accountant is going to understand a concept in North America is a bit tricky because we have some different perspectives there. But we manage that well. My team experience, as you can see on my resume there, I spent some time in Bermuda for work, and I was part of a team there, the national lacrosse team. We kind of built that up from the ground and took a group of young men, really, an under 19 team. And in Bermuda, adults are a little bit younger than here in the US. At 18, they're pretty much an adult there as far as partying and that aspect goes of it. So having to manage that team and listening to their input, they had a lot more input into what the team did on an international scale than just the coaching part of the staff part. So working with teams, I'm pretty comfortable with. When it comes to my opinions being different from the public, oftentimes they are, right? And I think within this committee here, we understand that it's, the best, whatever the best outcome is for the children, the education side of it is where we should go, right? So listening to the public, listening when you send out surveys and the public responds, well, if that's what the public wants, then that's what the public wants, right? So listening to them and trying to make decisions based on what they've had for their input and what they say versus leaving my personal opinions necessarily on the side. If I don't necessarily agree with the majority of them, I like to take a step back and objectively look at it and, what's the best decision for the education in town, for the kids and for the whole student body. So I think that would be my answer for that part of your question. Thank you.
Excellent. And I'm sorry I complicated it for you.
No, that's all right. It was chopped up a little bit here, so I couldn't catch the last part, but that's okay.
Thank you, Laurie. Any follow-up questions? Anyone have any follow-up questions on that particular topic that Laurie just mentioned before we move on? Mr. Lewis, any questions?
Yeah, I think my first one is, how are you going to fill Cliff's seat?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't really have to answer.
I don't know that I can fill his seat. I can just try my hardest, right? Yeah. I haven't had the opportunity to work with Cliff much at all, but I think I've come across him once or twice around town in real estate. I don't know if you would remember, but I think we did have one conversation once. So yeah, I won't be able to fill them. I'll just have to make my own, I guess.
Yeah, I was semi-joking, so.
I get you.
Just when I came to the committee, I brought with the advocate for the arts, arts, music, the specials. So that's near and dear for me, and that's that's just part of my stance. And I know I've had discussions with Jeff about this, and I don't know if you have any experience, and this is just coming from me. This has nothing to do with the other committee members, but do you have any experience with? Do you really think that should be a big part of our community, or the Boylston and Berlin school system? That's important to me. So I'm just curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it should be a bigger part, to be honest. So a little bit about me. My grandmother, she's passed now, but she was a piano teacher. So I grew up, I was taking piano lessons before I was in school. I've had family through that have been in the arts, Berkeley and whatnot. I studied sax when I was in school. I started in 4th grade, straight through high school, band, marching band, jazz band. Even after school, just continuing to play for fun. Something I stressed with Caroline, my daughter, we got a piano when she was born. We had someone bring in a piano. So the arts, especially music, is big for me. All the specials, I know right now I just had the experience locally with music, art, and the gym, but they're all important. I mean, we have to have, in my opinion, more of that. I know sometimes that's the first place to look when you've got budget issues, but no, it's important to me. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks, Keith. Any other questions?
I do not.
Okay, I will move to, I'll go alphabetical order. How about Angela? First name alphabetical. Angela.
Hi, Michael.
Hey.
Do you prefer Mike or Michael or?
Either one's fine. Mike is fine. Most people end up calling me by my last name once they know me.
Okay. Okay. Well, I was excited to find out that you have little ones that are coming into the school system, because I think that helps round out the committee too, to have some of the members who actually have children currently being educated in the school district. However, my question for you is, one of your major roles will be negotiating teacher contracts. So, and that can be a little tricky. So how would you handle it if you're at the negotiating table with one of your child's teachers?
That's a good question. Yeah. Well, again, kids are kids. They're there. We love them. But when it comes to a role here on a committee where, we're on the town side versus whatever side when it comes to negotiation, whatever's in the best interest of the town, the committee, the taxpayers, that's where I would focus my attention. Yeah, Caroline comes home every day. Oh, I love this teacher. I love that teacher. That's great. But when it comes time, we look at other things and not just their emotions.
Okay, thanks.
Angela, any follow-up questions?
I guess it's more of a follow-up question, more towards Lori's question. So how do you best handle it if you disagree with someone else on the committee? How would you state your case, or what's your philosophy on disagreeing cordially, I guess I should say, if you can?
Disagreements are disagreements. They can get emotionally charged. They can get heated, especially when you have different things at stake. But we're all adults, so we can probably handle adult conversation, and we look at it objectively. What are the reasons? Why do you feel this way? Why do I feel this way? And just present the case and listen. One of the things, like I mentioned there on my resume, it's adult learning and trying to create training and classes for these adults that work here. One of the biggest things we have to do is communication and listening. Often they're trying to deal with clients and they're trying to sell them on something. We've got a lot of salespeople that we work with, and they're just sell. Let me regurgitate all this information to you. And we try to teach, the best thing is to just stop and listen, try to put yourself in the other side's shoes and position and try to get some understanding before you go on.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Cliff.
Hey, Mike. And yes, we have chatted over real estate for sure. Thank you for your interest in joining the committee. Where Berlin in particular is a small town, and so it's so that when a position opens up on a committee, a town committee of any kind, as you probably have noticed, there are a lot of empty spaces on the town committees. So it's great that you've come forward, and I thank you for that.
Thanks.
The committee functions on a consensus building model. Not that we don't take votes, because under law we have to do that. But what this committee has always tried to do is come to a committee consensus before we vote, so that there are no divisive votes. I think, in my experience, that has been the case. And so I'm wondering what you think about what you would bring to the table for consensus development. What skills?
Yeah, well, in order to have consensus, you need a lot of data and facts to build that on. So I like to do the research. I like, I'm not a lawyer, but I like to play one on TV sometimes, or Zoom. So, finding those facts, finding that data, trying to interpret it logically, and then discussing it. And, my wife might disagree, but I have been known to change my mind after listening to someone discuss something. So I think that listening, communication, data, kind of fact-driven idea or opinion is what I would do.
Okay. The school committee has, and you wouldn't know this, because I didn't know it till I was on the committee. So it goes to show you, when you join the committee, there's lots of things you don't know.
Yeah.
There's 3 broad areas that the school committee is responsible for. And you're actually essentially, as a committee member, limited to these. One is budget, and that includes all the financial issues, as Angela pointed out about teacher contracts. But the broad area is called budget. The second broad area is policy, developing those policies by which the school system operates. And then the third broad area is hiring the superintendent. Lucky for you, and Jeff hopefully will keep this true, the committee will not have to worry about the third thing for a while. Thinking about then the 2 other areas, budget and policy, what skills might you bring to the table in thinking about those things?
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree. I've had a couple of conversations with Jeff, and I do hope he stays around for a while. I think he's probably a good advocate and resource for the town. As far as budget goes, I've been in financial services my entire life, negotiating contracts, real estate, negotiating contracts, analysis, financial analysis, making budgets. I started a project today where we've got a big rental going on with a big budget that needs to be reviewed and stuck to. So a lot of my financial background would cover a lot of that in the budget area. Policy, again, policy comes down to law and what's needed by law, what's able to be done by law, what can be done within the law, how can you interpret the law, whatever. And of course you would, I assume, rely on some legal advice there on that, but it's important to have a working understanding of that, I think, through real estate, number one, and just education and my experience in life as an adult, as another, with law, contract law especially, have a good working understanding of that. Of course, I'm not versed in every Massachusetts law that there is, but for the larger aspects. And then once it comes down to it, whatever the particular situation is that we'd be working on in the committee, I'd get down and do whatever research is needed to get educated on it.
Okay, and just one more thing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've been around long enough to know that a public committee, like a school committee, has to operate under the open meeting law.
Yep. And
that committee members they're not really school committee members, except for when they're in a meeting. So there's a bit of a strange situation you find yourself in if you haven't been in it before or been in any public office, or you're limited to the meeting to process material, information, ask questions, develop consensus, and it doesn't happen outside the meeting. I'm wondering, I don't know your personality, so I'm wondering what aspects of your personality would be able to deal with something that's pretty limited. Like we have to talk about you later, and we have to do it in the public arena. And some people, struggle with that. So what do you think about that?
Well, I'm not a millennial, so I don't have my entire life out in the public on social media or anything, but I'm certainly not shy or afraid of that or anything. So I think when I do conduct myself in the public, I am who I am. So what I say, I would understand is there. And so I would stand by it. That said, yeah, it's difficult. You have an hour, 2 hour, 3 hour meeting where you have to get everything done. That's definitely tricky. So I think you need, some time management there, right? And sort of a straight, get to the point, stick to the facts type of discussion attitude would be real helpful for a situation like that, right? I've not been a part of a public committee before, so this would be my first time doing anything like that.
Well, anecdotally, I will share with you that it's easier now that it's a regional committee. When I joined the committee, there was the Berlin School Committee, the Boylston School Committee, and the Toronto School Committee. And because there were only 3 members in Berlin, we couldn't even essentially talk to each other because we would form a quorum.
Yeah.
2 people were talking to each other. It was a quorum. And if it wasn't a posted meeting, we were in trouble. At least now there are 6 people. That makes that a little easier. And that's just an anecdote. There's not meant to be anything else than that.
Yeah.
I'm finished, Jim. Thank you. And thank you for your answers.
Thanks, Cliff.
Thanks, Cliff. I'll just, before I move to Susan, I'll just, because Cliff mentioned many of the topics that I as well were going to address, mainly because Cliff taught me all those. So I think he had the same conversation with me when I joined. But just to kind of piggyback off one of the topics that Cliff had mentioned about the challenges around open meeting laws, we also have policies, right? And operating consensus of operating policies where as part of your role on committee, you'll receive a lot of communication from, those taxpayers and the folks in the community that you spoke about. Typically, as a policy, we filter all communication through our chair and try to address topics as a committee in whole. So I just want to kind of add to that as well, right? And it's not really necessarily a question, right? But it's part of that process of understanding those policies and procedures and kind of how we operate under all those open meeting laws. And it becomes challenging, right? Because as an individual committee member, you have your personality and your individual thoughts and ideas, but you don't necessarily get to speak for the committee as a whole, right? So we have policy. So I just wanted to add that on top of kind of what Cliff was mentioning. So, but we'll move to Susan if you have any questions.
Okay. Mike, also, I wanted to thank you for your interest as well. It's great to have people step forward for committees in town, and we feel fortunate to have you at the table tonight.
Thank you.
You talked about working with adult learning a lot. So I'm wondering if you could speak to how you have or plan to prepare yourself for this new role and what we can do to support you.
Well, I think that goes a lot to what Cliff and James was just saying about, especially the open meeting law, getting up to speed on all of those necessary items. It's not that this can happen now, but back in the old days, like 8 months ago, when you could be at the ball field with everybody from town and, someone comes up and tries to start talking to you about something, it sounds like that's not necessarily allowed, or you just got to redirect them. I'm here to watch the game and not discuss town politics or whatever it is. As far as adult learning, what I've done to sort of prepare for this, honestly, I haven't been so busy the last few weeks. It's just been crazy. I haven't done a lot to prepare specifically for this role, other than to just start paying attention a little bit to more what's going on in town. Start, thinking about what I would want as a parent, as a person in town, and how I would want the school committee to be acting. And then if I am the one that you choose to vote to fill the seat tonight, just start trying to work with all of you at the next meeting, and on whatever business does come up and needs to be discussed.
So there are a couple things you should be aware of, and it sounds like you're ready to take advantage of them. One is that there is a required kind of course, a training for school committee members. It's provided by the Massachusetts Association of School Committees.
Okay.
And that requires a chunk of time, and it's only offered at certain periods, but it covers breadth of topics that are important to the school committee role. So we would want to get you hooked up with MASC to enroll in that whenever the first opportunity was. And the other is that we're about to pilot, and you get to be a guinea pig if we vote you in tonight, an induction process for new school committee members.
Oh.
You would be working with the induction mentoring subcommittee there, and any other members of the larger school committee who they think are important for you to meet with, and leadership team, to kind of learn the ropes of the school committee. So there are a couple of pieces that will be available to you right away to help you ramp up. I think that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, no, that's interesting to know about that course, and induction trainings I'm well familiar with. We do a lot of induction trainings. We have a number of different paths and programs that we work on. So I have a little bit of experience with that.
Yeah, well, you could help inform our process. Since it's a pilot year for that, we'd be happy to strengthen the process as we go along.
Interesting. Okay, great.
Thank you, Susan. I just sort of had one sort of question topic. I just kind of wanted to, some of the other folks already addressed, some of the questions that I was going to have. And I just want to kind of continue on a couple of the themes that some of our other members brought up. And it'll sort of, you'll see where I'm going with this. Susan mentioned the processes and procedures that we put in place for school committee induction, right? And that was one of our school committee goals over the past year, and some hard work was put into that. More importantly, the reason behind that, why we have that today, is because we didn't have that previously, right? So what's important from a school committee perspective is the commitment and the preparedness, right? So when we look at it from a totality, right, we obviously want new candidates to come in as prepared as possible, but long term, if you look at the way folks spoke about Cliff this evening and some of the things he done, right? I know for myself, and I'm sure the other committee members, right? We strive to, did we put the district in a better place when we left than when we started, right? And we work really hard towards putting those things in place. So knowing that this position right now, this appointment is just a 5-month temporary appointment during an extremely challenging time, nonetheless, can you maybe share just some of your overall general high-level ideas, right? Because we all we get into these things with some ideas and thoughts of how we want to be better and contribute, and our kids are coming, and we all do those things, right? But long-term, right, you're going to have to, if you're appointed and this becomes something that you're interested in long-term, right, there's going to be an election process come in May. There's the potential of being elected to a 4-year term seat, right? So you're talking 4.5 years of your life and your children's lives, and working with those students and working with the administration and the folks in the screen, right? So can you share with me some of your thoughts and ideas, and long-term, how you see this working out for yourself?
Yeah, well, the idea you bring up about induction, sort of an induction training or program, however you want to call it, I'd say I have to find that any group like this, whether it's school committee, whether it's an HR department, an operations department, whatever it happens to be, nobody ever seems to have a induction or a roadmap. Like I would call it a roadmap or something, like the first 90 days or whatever, whatever measuring you want to use for it. Nobody seems to have that. So I think that is a perfectly appropriate goal and program and something to work on, so that in the future, people who have to follow in Cliff's footsteps and try to fill those shoes, which can't be filled, get at least a head start or can hit the ground running type of situation. So yeah, that's definitely important. If it were to come to 4.5 years, working towards goals, what I would see for myself, 4.5 years from now, puts us right about to my son's graduating from kindergarten. So I would personally probably use that as a bit of motivation and goal to work to improve the situation, the district, leave it, as you said, leave it in a better place when you leave than when you find it, right? So that's a bit of my motivation and just an idea about, yeah, you should absolutely have some sort of guide or manual or operating process to give to new people, to new joiners in any group where it's, especially when it's a volunteer basis, what am I to expect? How do I operate? How do I raise issues, talk about issues, suggest issues? What are the procedures to follow? Where are the meeting locations, times, the requirements of each meeting? Things like that is definitely something that we should definitely have in place for anyone in the future to come, for any town committee, really.
Jim, can I just follow up on that for a sec? Oh, yeah, you're on mute, Jim.
Yes, please, Susan, sorry.
First of all, Mike, there's nothing to say that you couldn't stay on the committee until your son gets all the way to graduation from high school.
Yeah, no, just he put up 4.5 years, so that's just what I. That'd be nice. Yeah, we'll see.
Given that
We'll see.
you're looking at a 5-month role on the committee until you have to run again in May. How will you decide whether you want to run again?
I guess it depends on how crazy you guys drive me over the next 5 months. No, but I am really interested in it. It is something that I had been interested in a long time. I thought about before when we first had children. I started thinking, what should I do? How's my life going to change? So it's been on my mind for a while. And when I happened to see that this was available, that's why I jumped on it. So, I mean, barring any unforeseen calamities over the next few months, I imagine I would be interested in going forward. So we'll see how that goes.
Thanks.
Well, the unfortunate news, it's not necessarily up to you, right? Because
True.
all 6 of us may not be here come May. So it's not necessarily a given that any of us will be here. So,
All right.
Okay, I want to be cognizant of our time. We're creeping up on 7:30 here. And Mike, what you'll notice is that I'm very particular on time. So I want to kind of wrap this up unless there's any other major questions from anybody else. I'll leave us with one final comment. What I would say is just one final comment, depending, and we'll see how this next portion goes. But everything you think about coming to school committee and all that stuff, kind of just get ready to break that down and throw that out. Right. What I've learned, particularly as my time as chair and from Cliff and from these wonderful people, is that the most, aside from those 3 pieces of the puzzle that Cliff talked about, which is our roles or responsibilities, that and that only, which is a very challenging thing to understand, and that'll be a really no matter how good you think you're going to do it at that, it'll be really hard to understand that when you get here. That aside, what I've learned and what to think about as you maybe come up on your first meeting is the importance of the working relationship between the school committee, the administration, and the staff and the students as well, right? And how that goes, so goes this committee, so goes these meetings, so goes the success of our community and how we work with our district to move in, regardless of the direction that we go, to move in those directions, right? So it's just one of the things to think about. It's extremely important, and I mention that because we're at an extremely sensitive time in the world and the country right now, and we're having conversations that impact everybody in all different types of manners. And I think it's more important now than ever that as a totality in a group, we understand how to work together and work towards what's in the best interest of not only just our students, but the safety and health of our staff, our administration, and everybody else. So I'll leave us with that comment unless anybody has anything else. From a processy standpoint, the only thing required at this point, if I'm going to just, in the past, Mike, prior to becoming a district, if there was an open position, that would have been appointed by that individual community and their select board. Since becoming a district, it's now a process that falls to the school committee. With all that being said, I still think it's important. We still do look at ourselves as two different communities and want to make sure those communities feel they're addressed in appropriate manners. So I guess I'll leave it first to either of our folks or any of our folks from the Berlin side of the house, if there is a motion or not to move forward with a vote to appoint Mike.
I don't have any reservations about Mike. I think he'll be a good addition to our team. There's no red flags. I like other people are grateful that you stepped forward, and it was reassuring to me to find out something that you've been thinking about actually for a few years, because I think all of us on the committee are on the committee because we want to give back to our communities and we want to serve in some capacity. So I have no reservations, and I'm happy to. I think we're just, I don't know if I'm putting in a motion yet.
We're deliberating.
Yeah.
We're deliberating at this moment. And then we'll need a motion if we get to that point. But there may not be much deliberation. I don't know if there's anybody else has any other comments or topics that they want to cover.
No, I think I agree with Angela, and what I'm hearing is that Mike is a longtime team member. He's experienced working as a team, and he's experienced as an adult learner, which is, as you were saying, Jim, there's a lot to learn when you come onto the committee, a lot more than you realize until you're in the mix. And I think those are really important pieces. And I also heard an interest in being able to listen to the community and not become embroiled in your own child's experience in a way that would hamper your ability to listen to what the community is saying to you, or feedback that you're getting through various sources about larger issues. So I'm encouraged by the things that Mike shared tonight.
I would, oops, yes, I thought I was muted. I would echo what my two colleagues from Berlin have shared. There's nothing here to concern me. As Susan said, I appreciate what I think I heard you say, Mike, is that you are a learner and are desirous of learning, which is certainly something that you need to be open to the first 6 months to a year you're on the committee. And also that you do seem to bring some skills that might balance out the committee in a way that is needed. So that's how I think about it.
Keith or Lori, anything?
I just wanted to comment on something that Cliff said earlier, and I think, Jim, you've alluded to it too, is that the idea of the school committee before you're on it and after you're on it are two totally different things as to how it works. And I like that Mike sounds open to learning, to working with people, and to understanding what the role really is.
Great. Yeah, the idea of bringing an agenda to school committee goes out a long way. Otherwise, we'd have a hockey rink and a lacrosse field on the front of the high school at Tohoto right now if it was up to me. So I don't see that happening. Okay. I'm not hearing any major negative deliberations. So as it relates to moving forward, I would need a motion to appoint.
You know, I'd like to take the opportunity to be the one who makes the motion to appoint.
Thank you, Cliff.
I'll second that.
Angela, thank you very much. We will have a roll call vote. I'm going to leave Cliff last this time so he can be the last person to vote on his. That's what I'm going to do. So, Angela.
Aye.
Susan.
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
Keith.
Aye.
I will be an aye. And Cliff, I'll give you the last vote.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. So,
Is this where we clap?
I have a question though. Did you say you were going to appoint Mike in January? Or are you going to appoint Mike now to begin in January? I'm confused.
well, his first meeting will be the January meeting. So I will appoint him to begin in January because he will need to, if you recall, when Lori
Needs to be sworn in.
joined, the seat was open already.
Yeah.
So she was sworn in that night. But this will be Cliff's last meeting. So I'm appointing Mike to begin technically as of January 1st, I think was the date we were calling it. He'll need to go and have himself sworn in.
Yeah, because my resignation is effective December 31st. So,
Yeah.
Okay, so sometime after January 1, he'll get sworn in, but before the next meeting, so he can participate in the January meeting, right?
Sometime between January 1 and January 12th, which is our next meeting. So you'll get, I'll work with Christy, Mike, to provide you with the calendar so you can have our dates, our scheduled dates for our upcoming meetings in 2021. Typically, what we do is each month we schedule the date for our meeting and then a second date, typically 2 weeks after on a Tuesday for an as-needed meeting. And these days, the as-needed meetings have been as needed sometimes.
Yeah, Mike, when Eloise swears you in, she will also give you I think a conflict of interest online training link that you need to do, required, I think.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, congratulations and
Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
so you're welcome to stay on with us for the rest of the meeting if it behooves you.
Yeah.
If not, maybe you want your last first night of the month back to yourself for the next 5 months.
No, I'll listen in. Listen in, sure.
Yep. You might regret that. We're only on section 6 of the agenda tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's move it along. Okay. Let's move into section 7. We'll move into Jeff in our report section.
Okay, thank you. I do want to mention that before we go on, that Thursday, Wednesday night, supposed to snow. So we may have our first remote snow day. And I will try to, for everybody listening, I will try to make the announcement tomorrow for planning purposes. So that's that. So going on to my agenda, I'm going to go a little bit out of order. I'm going to take the assistant coach stipend for winter sports first. So this is an issue that came up. Fortunately, we've been able to keep sports this fall. And, we plan on having sports in the winter. There are no middle school sports, unfortunately. And one of the things that we typically have in winter sports, in basketball, for example, is you have a coach and you have an assistant coach sitting on the bench. And this is really more of a safety issue in case something happens, that you have two adults on the bench. That won't be the case this year because of the new rules related to COVID-19. Those coaches would have to stay with their team. So it's usually, if it's a varsity game, the JV coach would sit. If it's a JV game, the varsity coach would sit with it and help out. So because we have no middle school sports, what we want to do is we want to take the middle school stipends and split it, and essentially have a varsity assistant coach and a JV assistant coach. That would put two people on the bench at all times, and is really for safety reasons. And we have a policy, EBC, which is the supplemental COVID policies. There is a file in there, GCA. I think Susan and Cliff probably know it by heart, but it allows the superintendent to change job descriptions only for the time during this COVID crisis. So that's what we'd like to do. I don't believe it requires a vote because of the policy change, but the policy does require that we let you know that we're going to do that. And again, this is a safety. It really is a safety issue. If somebody gets hurt, somebody has to stay with the team, and someone can then go with the student athlete. So that's the first item. I don't know if there's any questions about that. I know you have AD Piccaro's job description in there. So I just wanted to summarize that. Any questions on that before
And are we doing winter sports, or is it just postponed until?
that's
I'm
another
confused.
thing I wanted to clarify. I sent in last week's weekly newsletter, I said that we would be remote the 21st through the 23rd, and then January 4th through the 8th. So we will have sports. The sports are only postponed or canceled during those weeks. And thank you for bringing that up, Angela. I can't tell you how many emails I got from parents asking that same question, thinking that the whole season was going to be canceled. It's not going to be canceled. And if for some reason we needed to go another week, something like that, the sports would follow exactly the same way the remote learning. I can cross that off my list. I did want to mention that. Thank you. The second thing, which is another shorter, I hope, issue, was the travel policy. If you remember, that's another one of these policies that fall under EBC supplement. And I'm not sure what file it is. It's really the last COVID policy that we put in the supplement. But as I read through it, and as we went through the Thanksgiving holiday, I can foresee the same issues coming up during Christmas. And I have talked to some other superintendents about this. And it's really the need to build in some flexibility into the policy. If you remember, we put this travel policy in place to keep people safe, really, and not to have any unneeded restrictions on people. So if you look at that policy, it says that if faculty or students of any age travel outside a high-risk state, I'm proposing that instead of state, we put an area, because within any state, there's always going to be red areas, there's going to be green areas. And it's altogether possible that someone who travels out of state is becoming more unlikely now as more states and more towns become red. But if you think about it, Berlin at this point is not a red town, it's still a green town. If somebody was coming to Berlin, for example, or some town like that in another state, they're really traveling from one green area to another green area. So I was just wondering if it would be possible to build some flexibility on that. And I wanted to get the school committee's opinion on it.
Just to clarify, Cliff, Jeff, are you proposing a change to policy at school committee? Not at policy, not at the policy subcommittee?
I just, yeah, and I guess I should have started off with that. I didn't think we had time to do it. It's another one of these where we didn't have a meeting, and I think with the Christmas holiday coming up, it's probably gonna apply. If you remember, we put the policy in place for the upcoming holidays. And it's something that when I went back and looked at it, I thought it would be better to build some flexibility into this. Again, as we see more and more cases, there's less and less green areas or clear areas on the map. But there still are some, and it's totally possible that someone travels to an area in another state that's green, and they probably shouldn't have a 14-day quarantine on them. Again, the policy was put in place for safety purposes and to keep our schools safe, and not to put any kind of unneeded travel restrictions on people. So I did want to get your opinion on it. It is a policy, and it would have to, I don't know how the vote would go actually, but I guess there could be a vote just to change that word from state to area.
So I have a couple of questions. Did I cut you off, Susan? Were you going to follow up? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Cliff.
Okay. Are you making this recommendation because certain circumstances have happened in our school district?
No, I'm making the recommendation because I thought about it in terms of, as I was sitting there with my own case of COVID, I thought about myself and going to, I'm from Rhode Island and I don't plan on traveling, but there are places in Rhode Island's a red state. There are places in Rhode Island, down in South County, for example, that are green. If I were just to go down to South County and come back, because there's no regulation in the governor's order that restricts travel between states. It just restricts, like, you can drive through a red state, you just can't stop there, and you just can't stop there for any given amount of time. So that, and we did have a case of a family that went to dinner in Rhode Island, another Rhode Island issue, who went to dinner and was just there for an hour. Now, I know where they went. I can't think of the town it was in, but it's altogether possible that where they went was a green town. And they had to keep their kids out of the schools for 14 days. That's the one that comes to mind because it's, again, in Rhode Island. And I know Rhode Island has a higher case count than ours. So,
well, actually, Rhode Island has the highest per capita case count in this nation. So there's that. So since there wasn't a particular issue that arose, I guess I'm wondering why you've raised the issue. I mean, I understand that you're thinking about it. God knows you're thinking about this stuff 24/7. I get that. And would this provide like a loophole in what the governor is doing? I mean, I know when we met as a policy subcommittee, you were really helpful because we were working to make sure the policy didn't conflict with the state, anything that the state was saying about anything. And I'm wondering, is there a conflict if we were to change this?
I don't think so, but I got to be honest with you. I don't know that for sure. I don't think so. Not from what I read.
Well,
And
And I'll give you another example. And I promise you, I'm not planning on traveling, but I have a house in Rhode Island too. So, and it happens to be in South County. And I know there are a lot of teachers, for example, that have houses on the Cape and areas like that. and they really shouldn't be restricted to go into those if they're in areas that are not red. So, you know, again, you know, I'm laying there with 2 lines in my arm, and I don't know why that kind of stuff comes to me, but when you don't have anything to do and nothing on TV, that's what happens. And so I've gotten questions from teachers about it, and in other districts, it's come up as well. As today, it's come up in the superintendent listserv. People in larger districts are having the same kind of issues, and so it has come up because more than one district. If you think about when we put this in place, if you look at what the nurses did when they went and they got the information, there were quite a few districts before us who put that regulation into place. So many of those who've done that are finding the same kind of issues. So and as we get, and of course it's related to the holidays. And you know what? And the reality is, if you think about this uptick we've had in absenteeism in the schools, it's altogether possible that people travel and then they come back and they don't feel well, and they just keep their children out for those reasons. So I think it just makes more sense to not be as restrictive about that policy. I don't think it helps anybody. I think it hurts them, actually. And I promise you, I'm not saying this because I plan to travel. I'm not.
So,
And if I do, I'll probably go to the Bahamas. See what the.
I need to understand a little bit more. I might have misunderstood all of this when I was first presented with it. So, I mean, I guess Cliff's comment about it, the idea of the policy not conflicting with the state's policy. I mean, the policy itself already conflicts with the state's policy, unless I'm incorrect, with our piece as it relates to the requirement to quarantine for 2 weeks, mandatory 2 weeks, regardless of a presented negative test, right? That conflicts with the state's policy as far as I understand it, unless somebody wants to correct me on that.
I would
right?
say it doesn't really conflict. It's more strict.
Which conflicts, right? So
Well, conflict means that they don't, you don't know where to fall because they say opposite things, contrasting things.
right. So we've already got. So what you're presenting the idea of restricting it or making it more strict, for lack of, I don't know how the right wording, than it is today. Which would be right. Is that how I'm understanding that?
No, I'm suggesting we make it more flexible. So
That's not. But the problem is it makes it more flexible in a lot of ways, because now what you're saying though is, here's what I'm seeing: students coming to school the day after, saying they went to visit grandma in Boston, right? The nurses sent home kids who went to visit family members in Maine and went out to dinner in Rhode Island. And now you're telling me what you're going to do is have a teacher in the classroom, have a student come into the classroom. We live next to Worcester. As far as I know, Worcester is a red community, correct? So many of these folks around here probably have family members in Worcester, right? Or want to drive through Worcester or go spend their Christmas Dick's Sporting Goods card that they got in Worcester on Lincoln Street, right? So now we've got a student comes into the classroom when they get back, and the teacher who might be concerned about their health, which is well warranted, hears this, and or nurse, that what you're presenting now allows you as a school to send those students home. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I follow you.
If you change it to red area, what you're saying is you as a school can send a student home who travels to any unsafe area now. So now you're going way above what the governor is saying, which is
I see.
In Massachusetts.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. Yeah.
I can't support that. That's not how I was I was seeing it as when I first heard the idea, I was seeing it as, okay, you know, you have kids who travel to maybe some safer areas in surrounding states, and now those students don't have to fall under the, but now I'm seeing some challenges when everybody goes back to school.
No, you're right about that, Jim. And so what you're saying is actually what I meant. I'm talking about when we're traveling outside the state. So it would have to be,
So
that's
that
what
would
I
be-
meant. Thank you for.
Okay, so you're saying they could travel, what you really want that to say is, and we'll get, what you really want it to say is area when outside of Massachusetts.
Correct. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Okay, so if we would need to word that correctly. And I'm all for implementing things that make safe, and I'm not sure whether I would have agreed or not. I wasn't here in November, so it doesn't matter. But I'm all for increasing safety if that's important, right? But at some point, we have to limit where we go with it. So we would need that to make sure that wording is appropriate.
Right. So thank you for that clarification, Jim, because the policy that we had said state. So when I was thinking about it, I was thinking about traveling outside to another state. That's why I was thinking about Rhode Island, because I do visit Rhode Island quite a bit. Not lately, but I was thinking about that in terms of going to another state, and there are green areas within other states. So we would have to word it that way.
So all right. So I'm not in favor of changing the wording. I'll put that right on the table. But also there's a procedure in this school committee to use the policy subcommittee to review policies. And while I don't want to be rigid on my last evening as a school committee member, I think procedures are in place that are reasonable and they need to be followed. And I would recommend that if this is an issue, it should be discussed by the policy subcommittee this month and presented to the school committee next month. And that would be my thought about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. You took the words out of my mouth, Cliff. I agree with that. I just think it would have been good to reach out and find out if we could have had a fairly short meeting in quick order with, whatever, meeting the posting guidelines. But I'm around, Cliff's around. I think that could have been done.
Well, I wasn't around.
You weren't around.
Yeah.
I think that it should be dealt with in the policy, because it's not on the agenda to take this vote. It's not in the business votes section of the folder. This is a surprise to me. And we're taking a lot of time in the meeting to kind of work out the kinds of things that we normally work out during the policy subcommittee.
Okay, so in the interest of moving the meeting along, I'm not hearing any major confliction with Cliff and Susan's thoughts. Am I at this time?
I just have a question. I know we want to move the meeting forward. So how are you going to regulate or know exactly where people are coming from or what state? I mean, I just know that when the kids that came in, they said, "Oh, I just went to wherever," and that's how they really found out. But I'm just curious. I mean, I understand going to a green area. I mean, obviously that's safe, but I agree with that. But I don't understand how you can like really legitly find out that is really where they came from. I mean, I'm just curious on that because that's what doesn't make sense to me. But
Well,
again,
there's no way to do it. There's no way to know for sure. I mean, most of these things, I mean, there's no way to know if somebody went to a red state for sure. I mean,
yeah.
there's no way to, there's no way to know for sure. And yeah, so that's the answer to that.
So it's more of the honor system.
Yeah, so much for that, huh? I do want to say, Susan, it does say in the agenda discussion, so there was no vote. I just pulled the amendment up, so it was just a discussion.
Okay. So I think what we'll do is, if we're going to consider that moving forward, obviously Jeff will have to work on the language on that. And then we can talk about if that's something we want to try to expedite for the upcoming holiday season or not, but we'll have to take that offline once all that's done and see how that's going to move forward. Obviously, we're going to be challenged with readdressing some of our subcommittees come our January 12th meeting as well. We'll be adjusting some of that, determining, might make sense to drop Mike right in there with Susan in the thick of things and Cliff's spot on the policy subcommittee meetings. You'll get a real good handle on what the role is jumping in there. So, okay. But in terms of, let's continue on with the agenda so that we can keep the evening moving. Jeff, does that conclude your section? Did you have anything else you want to touch on?
No, I got one more item in there, which is the just a kind of a
Oh yeah. Okay.
parent survey. So, we continue to collect data, and that sort of drives what we do during this pandemic. Not just from the medical professionals and from our towns through the positivity rate, but also through surveys, things of that nature. And so I've mentioned a number of times this idea of coming back to school full in, all students. And what I've never said is when. So it surprises me sometimes when people say, well, I can't believe you're thinking of going back on January. I said, well, that's a surprise to me too. But I think if you talk about something enough, people assume that it's going to happen, that you're planning it for sometime in the near future. And that's not true. There's actually no plan on the table right now. We're collecting data to see where that goes. We know right now that January is probably not going to be a good month in terms of COVID cases, although we also know that there's a vaccine. We also know there's a vaccine right around the corner. So we ask these questions, we continue to collect data because eventually we have to come back to school. And, I have these discussions with the leadership team, and the reality is, there is a vaccine that's here now. And at some point, we have to think about this idea of a transition. We're either going to have to transition kids back this year, or we're going to have to transition kids back in the fall. The best time to transition students back, we feel, is sometime during this year, because it's not going to be a smooth process. There's going to be a lot of anxiety, even with a vaccine. But the same thing will happen in the fall. So, ultimately, we have to think about the safety of our students. We also have to think about the safety of our teachers. And even if you didn't care about the safety of the teachers, who teaches these kids if teachers get sick? People aren't exactly lining up at the front of schools to get in. We have a hell of a time getting things like subs. So if you didn't care about the safety thing, which I do, you should have this kind of practical side of you that somebody has to teach these kids. And believe me, I sat in a hospital where people have 2 masks on, their hair covered, a face shield, a gown, gloves. Teachers don't do that. Teachers don't have that option, and you have to consider that too. And if you think that teachers stand 6 feet off from a 6-year-old, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. Teachers teach, and they do what they normally do when they go into those classrooms. So, as a school district, we're concerned about both the kids and the teachers. But there should be a time, there's got to be a time when we transition back. We don't have a plan for it now. we don't have a plan on the table. We've been talking about, we've been collecting the data. And we'll continue to collect the data, but, you know, I just want to tell people who think that we're planning this for, you know, January, that's, I don't know anybody, I don't know any district that's doing that right now. So one of the survey, we had a parent survey about a month or so ago, maybe a couple months ago. We asked some questions about just, you know, comfort level on coming back, but there was one question in particular that we wanted to drill down on, and that was a question of parents wanting to come back full time. And so we won't go over all the data, but, you know, so we took that question, we drilled down a little more and said to parents, well, what about, you know, we asked this question about coming back full time. What about, and so there was questions about, all right, is it gonna, okay, we want to come back, but we don't want to come back if it's 3 feet, or we want to come back, but we want to know the precautions first. So we asked some follow-up questions. We asked about four questions on follow-up. And so it went from about 70% parents who want to come back full-time to roughly about 55% full-time. Once we factored in things like distances. So it would be under 6 feet, but there's still PPE in place. The point is we have about 50% of the community who want to come back full time and is willing to come back full time, and about 50% who don't. And so in terms of coming back full time, that's where we see our communities right now. It's almost split. You know, parents will say, listen, and there have been comments like that. We don't feel comfortable with anything, but we're still willing to send our students back. Again, we do it just to collect the data. And, you know, that's certainly data that plays into what we need to ultimately make a safe decision about when we bring our students back. Is there any questions about that so far? What I've said about not, you know, we don't have any plans on the table right now, but we are collecting the data. You know, we'll be upfront about the fact that we plan on doing it this year sometime, if we can safely. But we don't know. We'll continue to monitor this. We'll continue to monitor the cases. We'll continue to monitor what the medical professionals say, and we'll continue to monitor what the community wants. I think it's something we need to consider. Any questions about that piece of it right now?
No, I just think you might need to resurvey again closer to an actual time when you might go back full time, just because of the timing of these two surveys, the initial one and the follow-up. The initial one happened when things were starting to improve, and then the follow-up one happened more in the middle of this fall holiday surge. So I feel like once we're past the surge and the cases start going down again, your percentage of families that want to go back full time may again increase. So I just feel like the timing of things was kind of messing with your data a little too.
Yeah, oh, no question about it, that the number of cases has an impact on the anxiety. And like I said, we'll continue to do this. This isn't the last time we'll do it. And that's a great point. The first time we did it, cases were pretty low, and you know, we've done it just when we're starting to have this uptick. So, and doing it in January isn't going to give us any better result, we don't think. So it will be a little bit later down the road, and we'll try to narrow the questions really around the reentry plan. And again, we have to see with things like, you know, we have to see cases in the community. Cases in the schools are still pretty low. And again, you know, we get a vaccine coming. We you know, we don't know what the availability, although the governor said, you probably all have seen that it'll be available to K-12 educators and early childhood educators, February through April. So, but we see, I mean, we don't know how that's going to go either. So we continue to look at it, and we need to do this. And, you know, Peter, why do you need to do all this? Because there'll be a time when if we don't, we're going to get caught flat-footed and we're not going to be able to make a decision. So we need to collect this. But, you know, I think people should be confident that we're not going to take a survey and they say, okay, we're all in next week. That's not going to happen. So and even when it does, we'll most likely have a phase in. It won't be all of the kids all at once. We'll look at the schools that have, probably elementary schools. They have the most room in them and they have small class sizes. Middle and high school have bigger class sizes. And so those will probably be phased in later. So that's where we are on this. And what we plan on doing tonight with the survey is Carol's going to go a little more in depth on this, and then we're going to turn it over to the principals, and they're just going to give you some general, interpretations of what they see in the surveys in their schools. Carol?
Sure.
Can I just make, Carol, before you go, I have two comments, Jeff, based on what you're saying. I think it's great, and I think we need to have a direction, and I think it's important that you talk about putting a time frame in place. A couple of things, it's one thing to say you're going to put a time frame in place, but at some point you actually have to put a time frame in place. So just saying you're going to put a time frame in place doesn't really accomplish that at that point. But so at some point we need to focus, put some some timelines in place and tie some analytical data to that and how that decision criteria is going to happen, right? So that's one thing that I think moving forward we need to probably see more of. Secondly, to me, just hearing about the survey results from the community is extremely important, but it's only half the story, right? So I think it'll be important during that time frame to present us with feedback from the school buildings and the teachers as well, right? Because there's a other half to this story, and I know the union and their representatives have done some of their own surveys, and I don't know when we'll see that stuff, but I know they've done some of their own surveys. But I think it's important that we're shared that information, right? Because again, it's the processes won't work unless we determine how that works all together. And then the last piece, it'll be interesting to see how all that comes together, right? With the latest was shared with me today, that the latest release from Department of Education as it relates to the effect that the lack of teaching and instructional teaching in front of the actual student on a daily basis is having on children today, and the Department of Education's decision to move forward with increasing the average time required on a daily basis for instructional learning, right? And how that will affect these plans and decisions moving forward. So, and because that's going into place the end of the month, right? So I think there's a lot of things that you guys have to obviously adapt to over the next 30 to 60 days as we make these decisions. So just a couple of thoughts. Sorry, Carol, go ahead.
That's okay, Jim. I just want to make sure to clarify. I know Bob was next on the agenda, so are we just jumping into my report?
We're gonna go that to stay on top. We'll stay on topic.
Okay, all right. And Jim, to your point, I did mention this in my report about the student learning time. And as Jim just said, this morning, DESE, the board voted to adopt amended regulations that are requiring districts to do an average of 35 live instructional hours per 10 days if you're in a hybrid model. And then if you're in a remote model, they are requiring 40 hours of live instruction in 10 days and over a 10-day period of time, both of which they expect daily check-ins, face-to-face live check-ins with students. So that is very, very strict new regulations. We have gotten our numbers based on a survey that we submitted earlier in November. We do need to make some adjustments, and already the principals are starting to look at those numbers with me. We're going to be looking at those with staff. We've started to do that on the middle high school level. And I think I'll do a fuller report on that in January so that you can take a look at the whole picture and what we've been able to address, because it literally came out this morning and more to come, guidance from the state. So since you mentioned it, I did want to follow up with that information. I think my focus tonight is really around the fall parent survey. And Angela, I thought about what you said with when this came out, the results of this survey. So we sent this out the end of October, got our results in the beginning of November. What's most important, there's a couple of specific takeaways, I think, in relation to a survey that was done at the beginning of the school year around some of these topics. And I think it's important to know progress that we've made to that point. One, that we honored our commitment to do this survey, to continue to do these surveys. As Jim mentioned, we're following up on that to parents to hear their voice. We certainly just sent one out to the staff. We're going to be looking at that data probably this week with some of our members of our association. But I think the other piece is looking at some of the specific improvements we've had a chance to make since then. So specific takeaways from that survey, I would say, are improvements in the use of technology, that the students and parents are better able to find assignments now and navigate technology than they were in the spring. And I attribute that to, we made a decision around Google Classroom being the kind of the mainstay for grades K through 12 and where you would go to for assignments. So I think also to the availability of training modules. I know that we had a teacher doing some in-person synchronous training with parents, offering that opportunity, the modules that are online, and a more of a comfortableness, I think, with being able to go to Google Classroom to find those assignments. So we see in the survey improvements in that area. I think also too that we increased the number of hours for both synchronous and asynchronous learning time. In the spring, we're averaging about 1 to 2 hours daily. Parents were recognizing in both synchronous time and asynchronous time. We've been able to increase that between 3 to 6 hours in both scenarios. And parents are telling us from the surveys, they sort of are right in the middle with being comfortable with that number. That they're seeing their children either online synchronously or online or during asynchronous time, and they're finding that that's a good balance of time right now. Overall, about half, I would say about half the parents in the survey. We do have a process in place for identifying those necessary changes. I know that the principals and I have met to go over the surveys, and then they took those surveys and went over them with their staff, and they reviewed them, and they selected some specific targeted areas for improvement. And I also would say too that they acknowledged the positives that they received from the parents in the survey, which was important for staff to hear. And the principals are going to address those specifically in just a few minutes. Finally, I also wanted to mention, so we're anticipating with the changes in the student learning time, some addition of some additional live instructional hours. And I've also noted we have been able to get some tutoring online, both in we're doing Title I tutoring, some more remedial tutoring time from the elementary right through the middle high school level. And we're hiring tutors right now to also support those remedial tutors, math, ELA, for example, to service students as well. So we're providing that opportunity for all of our students K through 12. I think one of the questions takeaway question that we received, I think, in asking about the school committee support and the district help, I think is the understanding that we're going to start making these changes. There's going to be some adjustments perhaps around scheduling during the days. And I think when we think of families doing that, that means that families are also perhaps going to have to adjust some of their schedule during the day to afford their children the opportunity to get on to synchronous learning time. So I think they're just to know that, just to be flexible around that. So, and also too, as far as getting student feedback, Diane is going to address it in her piece in just a minute. So I'm going to pass this over now to each of the principals. I didn't know do you have any questions for me before I let the principals speak? They're going to be more specific about their schools. Okay,
That's helpful.
Diane?
Just a helpful context, Carol. Thank you. And I assume that you'll be communicating directly with families, or Jeff will through his newsletter about that issue of being ready to be flexible with your family schedules and reshifting with the school district.
Yeah, Susan, I think that's going to be important that we share the state is going to come out with the information from the survey that happened that we sent to them in November around student learning time. So we will see that publicly. So we have to explain more about that because there's an understanding that we need to make some adjustments, not major, but we do need to increase some hours for synchronous learning time, live learning time. And so I think that can be part of that communication as well.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah. So Diane, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, just so Diane, before you go, from an agenda standpoint, guys, I just want to, I understand we're jumping around a little bit. Bob, what I'm going to do, Bob, is I'm just going to move you under this part to the last piece of it, for the budget presentation, just so we continue with a good flow for the conversation. I don't want to drop the budget in the middle of any of this other stuff. So just so everybody else looks, we'll just move everything else up. I'm going to put Bob, obviously I'm going to put Bob right at number 6 before policy subcommittee. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. So first I want to start off by thanking all of the parents for, their honest and open feedback regarding their feelings and views about sort of our hybrid learning plan. And, when we took a look at all of this data, there were really sort of 3 main areas at Tohoto that stood out that we had looked at being able to make some tweaks and changes to our plans. One of the first sort of takeaways and red flags was parent drop off and pickup, which is like the bane of my existence. But, if I could pick up the building and move it back and build, a couple longer driveways, we'd be in good shape. But, I do have to say, I want to thank the parents for, after the first couple of weeks and after I had sent out sort of some friendly reminders, they really have done a great job, especially Mr. Campbell in dropping his son off. But I have really done a great job of adhering to those times in which, if they were dropping their kids off, that they were waiting until that time. We're having issues with backups and safety on Route 70. The Boylston Police have done a great job in helping us out with that. And also Sally and I have been able to time it so that we know exactly when, okay, these last kids are getting off of the bus, that we can move those cones and begin to let people in. So, the traffic is flowing much better. And I hope people are happier. And I want to say, thank you. And I appreciate the parents for following those new rules regarding the time of drop off and pickup. The second big one was attendance. There was, in the very beginning, there was a lot of confusion surrounding attendance and how attendance was going to be taken, at what time it was going to be taken. Was it going to be taken for every class or just at the beginning of the day? So we, Sally and myself and the teachers, along with the secretaries, have worked, very hard to sort of smooth and streamline the process. And I think finally now with, December, that we have, come into a rhythm as far as attendance is concerned. The Department of Education required that a whole new attendance code was developed for remote learning. And so, if a student was sort of in person and present, they were coded one way. If they were remote learning and present, they were coded another way. And so, you can imagine being a classroom teacher, where your roster has, 24 kids and you've got to mark, not mark some, and that counts as present because they're in front of you, and mark others with an RP because they're actually on the screen and present. And sort of keeping track of all of that. But I think that we finally come into a system. The nurse has worked very hard with the secretaries as well to take a look at the attendance after it is, taken by the first 2 periods, the teachers, and they have, been making phone calls, sending emails to parents and to students as well. If somebody is sick, the nurse has been following up with them. So they have done a really nice job with that. So I think that, our attendance system has sort of worked itself out. And then lastly, one of the concerns was, as Carol had mentioned, sort of the Google platform. And, for anyone, and especially developmentally for students in middle school and for high school and certainly in middle school, that, the executive functioning skills that it takes to be able to manage the amount of emails that one gets from Google Classroom when assignments are posted, changes are made to assignments. We as adults have difficulty with that. And, we're now just expecting our students to be able to do that. And so, we as a faculty and staff sort of took a look at that and made sure that the things that we were able to help out with, like the timing of assignments, the timing of due dates, we have made tweaks to those to try to make it easier for students as well. And what we are going to be doing is on Friday, Sally and myself, along with the Middle School Student Advisory Council and the High School Student Advisory Council, has developed a student survey that we will be giving to all of our students in grades 6 through 12 on Friday during block 8 to find out how they are feeling about, their overall feedback on how they feel as though their, first semester of the 2020-2021 school year is going, but also their feelings and views about health and safety, our protocols, social emotional well-being, as well as academics and academic support. What is working well for them? What is not working well for them? And then, when we come back from break, getting back with the Student Advisory Council, really digging into that data to see, if there are changes, that we can make to help make, students' lives a little bit easier, and then in turn, probably parents' lives. And so we will be looking to do that as well when we return in the spring after vacation. Woo, fast forward. And, I think that, I just have to say that, I think that as much of a struggle this has been, I think it's teaching a lot of us about, things that I think we took for granted. And, one of the things that the kids had said is that just in conversation that I've had with them is that, one of the things that they would like to see still happen, even after COVID is gone, is to go out and take those breaks with their teachers and with their classmates and walk around the building and have those conversations that come much more easily when they're not sitting at a desk, behind a desk in a chair in a classroom. So that is it for me. Does anyone have any questions at all?
I just had one question, Diane.
Sure.
Can you tell us anything about what the attendance trends are right now? Are they improving, getting worse?
Yeah, sure. Actually, ironically enough, our attendance is, except for these past couple of weeks, when we have seen an increase in the number of students either having to quarantine or they themselves are sick, that the attendance is actually around 97% attendance rate.
Wow. Okay, thank you. And
Sorry, my dog Jasmine, sorry. I mean Paige, woo. I don't even know my dogs, I
sound
know.
like big dogs. I'm very happy to hear you're doing a student survey. I think that's great. You'll probably get really useful information from that. So good going on that. That's good to hear.
Ace, you want to go next?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So given the time, I have a couple of takeaways, but I'm going to try to keep them brief. The purpose of the survey when we sent it out, as I envisioned it, was to spark some conversation, discussion within the building, and ultimately drive some change and some improvement. I was really happy. We asked every parent to fill it out for every kid that they have in the school. And so our response rate was roughly about 70%, reflected about 70% of the student population, which I thought was really stellar. We took a look at it by grade level as well, just so when we broke it out, we could look for trends, because we do a lot grade level teams in my building. So it made sense to look at it that way. What we saw was, in the lower grades, we saw a lot more participation in the survey, upwards of 80%. I believe that was in first grade. I've got that somewhere, 82% in first grade. And as the kids aged, the participation in the survey dropped down to, I think the lowest one was fourth grade, where you had about 50% of the respondents. That's also one of our smaller grade levels. So we kind of took that as to set the stage for conversation in the staff meeting. We unpacked all of the data. I have pie charts galore if you would like to look at them. One of the things we noticed, and one of the things that I was really pleased with, was the overall positive response to some of our new procedures we put in place. Similar to Diane, our drop-off and arrival procedure looks so drastically different. It was a nightmare to create. It was, it was scary changing it so drastically. But overall, I felt like the feedback was really positive. I think my sense from the comments and the survey was people really appreciated the time and the effort that the teachers and I put into place to make things as safe as possible for the kids. I think one of the big takeaways we had in terms of student learning, when we looked at grade levels for how independent were kids and how long were typical assignments taking families, it offered an opportunity to really recalibrate what we were doing. You'd expect, the lower grades, kindergarten, it required a whole lot more supervision from the parents' parts and for the parents' part. And it's, as they moved up the grades, you expected that to drop. And when we saw an anomaly there, it sparked a conversation on a grade level. What kind of assignments are we doing? And what I really liked was that it sparked inter-grade level conversations. And they did the same thing because we had a grade level that kids were spending a lot more time outside of the trend. And so it brought conversation and some recalibration on some teams' parts. Again, acknowledging that the data is imperfect. And when you get up into that fourth grade, you're only looking at 50% of the population, but at least it's a starting off point for conversation for the teachers. And we did see some adjustments. One of the ones that really surprised me, I thought, there was a question that we asked about students transporting things to and from home. And we do that because you don't really know when you're going to go remote, and you also need to be prepared for those asynchronous days. So there is quite a bit of things that the kids have to bring home. I was anticipating hearing a lot of it from the lower grades. You have little kids carrying a lot of stuff, but what surprised me was the upper grades. Those parents noticed that they were carrying more, and there was some comments and concerns about the weight. Some of that wasn't in the survey. I heard that on the side too, and how much is appropriate. So it sparked a conversation in at least two of the grade levels about what are we having kids bring back? What can we do electronically? And what is the really important things? Overall, I thought the survey was really, really informing for us, and it brought some good conversation to the building. I have some other ones, but I don't want to take us too long in, so I'll take any questions, and I'm happy to follow up with people later as well if they need.
I just have a brief question about, I think one way to get participation in these surveys up is for parents to hear that you're actually digesting and using the results to make changes. So I'm wondering how you're going to communicate with parents what those participation rates look like at different grade levels and what you're doing with the results.
And I think, I talked about the conversations that took place in the classroom, but there were also some opportunities for us to reach out to families. I know one of the grades did, they kind of spurred on their own little survey out to parents and around what they were seeing to gather some further information. I think ideally I would have liked to have shared the overall survey results out sooner, but I was holding off because I wanted the school committee to see it first. But I think to your point, absolutely, they're going to participate if they know that we're actually doing something with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for them not necessarily to have a big data dump with everything from the survey, but highlighting some key pieces that were really informing your thinking in school would be probably useful.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
No problem.
Thank you, Ace. And finally, John.
What, me? What? Is it time? I can't compete with those two, but I will try. It's important, I think, to remember when we talk about this survey, is it went out pretty early after kids came back. And so one of the things that we, or at least I was looking for, was some feedback on the changes. And Mr. Thompson kind of alluded to some of those things, and Diane as well. And drop off is going much better, Ms. Tusseri. I'm, as a parent, very pleased. But we wanted to get feedback because there were a lot of changes. There was a real drive to move kids into technology that we might not have done under other circumstances. But in the same breath, part of the challenge in the survey is it was done, because it was done early, a lot of what you got in the survey was gratitude. The comments were full of, my kids' teacher is working so hard. I'm so grateful my kid's been able to come back to school. And I think it kind of shades a little bit. As much as I love praise, it kind of shades a little the information that we got back. I think when we follow up with another survey, I think we're going to see a better picture of where people are at. We're asking parents to make tremendous transitions. And as Carol's alluding to, we're going to be asking them for even more. And I think that this survey kind of points in that direction. It gives us some areas to look at. There were a couple of things that stuck. The survey, as I kind of indicated, was very, very positive. Parents reported, Mr. Thompson did beat me with participation, but we had a lot of feedback around direct versus asynchronous instruction. And we used kind of the survey, if you've seen the survey questions, they're kind of Goldilocks questions, too little to too much, too easy to too hard. So when we asked about the amount of direct instruction, 58% of people thought it was just about right. And only 4% thought it was too much. When you went to the asynchronous side, 35%, a third of people thought it was too much asynchronous learning. And that became a focal point when I discussed this with my staff at a staff meeting, because we had to think through, with asynchronous instruction, it's parents helping their kids with really no teacher support. They're watching videos, they're working on online programs, but there's no teacher there to tell them what to do. And so we've become more cognizant of supporting parents through that process. It's a lot to ask. And parents reported over and over, my kid won't do this for me. How do you get my kid to do math? How do you get my kid to do whatever? So that's an area I think we're going to have to continue to focus on. I was pleasantly surprised to find that everybody found Google easy to use. People who had never used it before, 87% of people thought it was easy to very easy to access student learning through Google Classroom, which is amazing. Very similarly, they found it easy to track assignments, which is all good news. It means that kids are, with support, able to access the things that they need. And they've become so much more independent over the last several weeks. Teachers talk about it all the time. When we were talking about, the possibility of a snow day, we were all in a much better place around what kids are going to be able to do if we stay home. And then the last thing I'll mention, just because Ace mentioned it and Diane as well, arrival and dismissal did change it for early Memorial too. But it was like all good stuff. We changed the way kids get dropped off. They used to, parents would pull up, they drop their kids off, they'd all mill about in the inner hallway. Which, when you get 50 kids in the hallway with one adult, leads to behavior challenges. Now what happens is people pull up and I'm out there telling them when they can go into the building and they go right to their classrooms, which has eliminated a lot of that blockage, and everybody was happy with that. Very similarly, we tried something new. Mr. Thompson and I started a dismissal program last year, and we expanded its use this year so that when parents come now, they have a little 5-digit code in their car. And we have teachers out there who put the code in, and we know whose car is there and what order they should be leaving. And it's really sped up our dismissal process. Everybody's super pleased with that. So for all of the hard things with COVID and the changes we've had to make, there have been some positive outcomes for it. And so you'd be anticipating Dr. Henry's question. It will be important to feed back to parents, not only the good stuff, but to start to recognize, we see this struggle around you guiding your children through asynchronous learning, and this is how we're going to help. I think that's our next step, at least at Berlin. Questions? Excellent.
Okay. Thank you to the principals. And I want to just close out by saying the teachers are very much partners with us in talking about, they want to be with their students. They want to see their students, and they are always working on ways to spend more time with them. And so I wanted to mention that, and also just to say we will continue, as was mentioned, conducting these surveys with different stakeholders. We think it's important information for us to look at as we continue to grow and make adjustments, and certainly look at the new student learning time, and we will reach out once we get those in place and have made our adjustments with our staff and our students. So that's it for us today. Thank you.
Okay, Carol, was that everything you wanted to cover under your section of the agenda?
Yes, it will be, Jim. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay. I'm going to move then to Karen.
Thank you. I know that it's getting late and they asked us to kind of keep it brief tonight, but there's a couple of things I just wanted to highlight from my report. The first is that the influenza vaccine is required for all students by December 31st. And our nurses have been really getting the word out to parents and asking them to send in proof of the flu vaccine as soon as they get it. They're still chasing it down. I wanted to put it out there again. We'll keep putting that information out to parents. On top of everything the nurses are doing, they're trying to track all of that. I think we'll probably have a few days of grace when they first come back, unless the state tells us we can't do that. But we really need those flu vaccines and the documentation turned in as soon as parents can get that to us. The other thing I really wanted to share is just maybe some good news about all of this. We're kind of feeling proud that in spite of the fact that we've had cases throughout the schools and we've seen increasing cases, that so far we haven't had community spread from student to student with all of the procedures in place, the safety measures that are in place, the health, and then quarantining when we have to quarantine. And I hope that that's at least a little bit of a hopeful note in all of this as we go forward. The rest of my report is just a little bit on the 5-year plan and progress on that, but I won't go over that now unless there's any questions.
Karen, what happens if families don't have that vaccine, proof of that vaccine a few days after they return?
So that's what I meant by a few days of grace, where Jeff has agreed that we are not going to exclude students on that first day back unless the state tells us we have to. We're hoping that within a few days that everybody will have that. Even the students who are fully remote are required to have that. Homeschool students are not. And if they document a religious exemption, they're not required to have it, but otherwise everyone needs to have it.
Or what? They're not allowed to participate in school?
Susan, we don't,
That's what, go ahead, Jeff.
I don't want to interrupt you.
I
We
was
don't have
gonna
any
say,
answer on
we
it?
haven't gotten final word from the state, but that's what we're hearing, yes.
The, at the commissioners, update, this week, no, end of last week, he said that there should be some guidance on it shortly of what to do, because again, we're left with that, well, what do we do if they don't have it? So we're hoping to have some, general, guidance that all superintendents all districts can use.
Thank you.
Sorry, Karen.
That's okay. I'm all done unless there's anything else.
Okay, great. Thank you, Karen. Paul, you're up.
So again, in trying to be brief, I had planned for Keith an interpretive dance of my report this evening, but I guess I'm going to have to, put that off for a little bit longer. You have my report. I think the main thing with the first thing about the number of Chromebooks out, 168 at Berlin, 238 at Boylston Elementary, and 357 at Tohoto, for a total of 763. And I gave you the percentages there of what that is of students. I just wanted to also make the comparison, like in the spring, that number was about 120 total for the district. So, about a 500% increase in the amount of technology we put out to students and to families to take advantage of remote learning. The other piece, just a brief bit about, we do have 5 families taking advantage of getting internet access through the Verizon hotspots. And on average, they're using about 3.2 gigs of data. So these kids really are utilizing these tools quite a bit on a monthly basis. So it gives us a little bit of data to look at in terms of what the average kid is doing at home. And that's all I have.
Any questions for Paul? All right, great. I can always count on that crew to pick us up and get us back moving on the agenda. I like it. All right. This guy, though, coming up. I don't know. I don't know if I can say the same. Bob, we'll pass it on to you, bud. This is the fun stuff.
To me, so I had, the first item was just a brief update. Usually we present the region's financial statements at this meeting and the results of the audit. That audit was just completed recently. That'll be presented at the January meeting. So that will just an informational update. And the next, I'm going to dive into the presentation. Just going to share my screen. So bear with me. Can everybody see this?
No, Bob, we still just see you.
Okay. Oh, here we go. How about now?
Yep. That's good, Bob.
All right. I don't know if you can see the whole presentation or if it's kind of in a more of a window, but I'm just going to use this version that's showing.
Can you take it out of, so we don't see your advanced slides? It's in full presentation.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I thought I clicked it already. It didn't seem to like it had worked, but so. Just going to start with our assumptions for the budget for this year for FY22, which is that we're returning to full-time in-person learning for the entire school year next year. in that our state funding of circuit breaker will be normal or relatively normal. And that's used to offset a significant portion of special education expenses that otherwise would be incurred in the general fund. The high level view of the process, just to refresh people's memories. We develop a level service budget initially, which is continuing existing programs and then providing mandated special education services and meeting our contractual obligations. We look at additional requests, things like district improvement plan, and factor those in to the extent that we can. We're looking right now at our preliminary budget. We'll have a feedback loop after tonight's meeting. We'll share that with town officials. We'll also get feedback from the school committee, go through a review and revise process. We'll get new information from the state in January that tells us our state aid. We might learn new things about that impact our expenses. And we'll provide a revised budget in February. In February, we also have, at that point, we also have the information on assessment impact to the towns. So for this year, Jeff, did you want to comment here, or do you just want me to keep going?
Yeah, just keep going, Bob.
Okay. Jeff and I last year, when we talked to the towns, it was a fairly sizable ask that we made of the towns, particularly in Boylston, and we had committed to the towns to deliver a level service budget this year. That includes funding our contractual legal obligations, things like steps and lanes on the teacher contract, other contracts that we have, transportation, things like that. And it includes funding to maintain existing programs and services. It doesn't mean we're spending the same amount of money, but that we're going to provide the same level of service. One position we have here that's an increase is the special education team coordinator. Right now, this position spends 1 day each in each of the elementary schools, and the needs are clearly have been demonstrated to be more than that. We've been operating knowing that we would need to increase this at some point in this year. It's become much more clear, especially with kind of the social emotional challenges of students this year, that we need to make this a full-time position. It was previously full-time and was cut to help funding putting school psychologists, making that a full-time position in each elementary school, which is also critical. And we've found that we need this position to be full-time as well. We're reviewing this as level service. We need this to maintain our existing services and supports for special education students. We've also added 2 paraprofessionals at Berlin Memorial to fulfill IEP supports. There's some new students in the school, and we have to support them with one-to-one supports. We've also have some increases in technology and curriculum. These are not new investments. These are replacing outdated technology, Chromebooks, and they're also replacing curriculum that has licenses that have expired. So again, these are level services. We didn't have enough in our budget to in our base budget last year to support what we needed this year. So those are some small increases as well. Some context for where we stand. This is FY19 per pupil expenditures. It's data that's provided by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education based on reports that each district has to report to the state annually. FY19 is the last fiscal year available. I anticipate FY20, usually the most recent fiscal year that completed, in this case last year's FY20, typically available in January. So we will have new information in January. But using this information, which is the most recent at this point, we show where our districts stood relative to some peer communities. And just to remind everybody, in FY19, we were 3 separate districts. So we have Boylston and Berlin separately here. On the next slide, I have the region I'll show you, but you can see Boylston is on the low end of the spectrum. Berlin's on the high end, 86th percentile. Some of what drives Berlin being high is the relatively small class sizes. They do have the capacity when we're full in to support more students. And that would spread some of the fixed building costs over more students to bring that number down. So Boylston, on the other hand, the last time we reported this, I believe they were in the 9th percentile. They're now in the 25th percentile. So we've had some town support to increase the budget. But we're still, you know, relative to most of our peer communities, kind of on the lower side. Context on regionals, you know, in this case, Berlin-Boylston just represents Tohoto. We were closer to about the 45th percentile the last time I reported this. This time it's last year. This year it's about 39th percentile. What I've also highlighted is the districts that are highlighted in orange are districts that are just middle school, high school districts. And the ones that are in blue are fully regionalized K-12. So we're, you know, out of our kind of what we look at as some peer districts, we're on the low end, but not far off. So here's what our first pass budget looks like. We'll explain that as we go, but we wanted to start out with a high level picture of what the summary increases were. Berlin Memorial is an increase of 3.4%. Boylston Elementary 4.0%, and Tohoto 6.5%. I'm going to pause just briefly. Is there any questions on these figures? Hearing none, I'll continue. The drivers of the increase at Boylston, really the largest single driver was increased staff participation in the health insurance plans. We also have an estimate of an 8% premium rate increase from our health insurance provider. Our rates are fairly low relative to peer communities. And we've had in the past few years some, I'd say pretty good fortune or good experience rates in terms of medical claims. And the trend has gone a little bit less favorable, which is what's driving the estimated 8% increase. That accounts for more than half of the overall 4% increase. 33,000 is an increase in teacher salaries. There is one retirement factored into that in a salary reduction for one position that basically for that retirement, we're assuming a lower cost new hire would fill in. So that's how that arrives at 33. In special ed, we've seen more needs for medical and therapeutic services such as OT, PT, speech, and that's a contributor to the increase. The technology replacement, currently we only have $7,500 in technology hardware replacement in our budget. Just to give you a context, we have about 50 Chromebooks per grade, and if we're replacing each of the 5 grades 1 through 5 yearly, their useful life being about 5 years for a Chromebook, it's about $15,000 to replace a grade. So adding the $16,000 will enable us to replace Chromebooks each year. We also have to replace over time, other things like the projectors on the wall that work with the Chromebooks for video instruction, staff laptops. This gets us to basically funding that will enable us to replace our existing technology. It's not to pay for new technology. 13,000's related to the conversion of the elementary sped coordinator position, converting it to full-time that I talked about before. And there's a $53,000 decrease in transportation costs for foster and sped transportation. There is a student that we're no longer responsible for on foster transportation, and for sped transportation, we have a student that's moving up to Tohoto. Then you'll see an increase there. Is there any questions on Boylston?
Bob, maybe I'm wrong, 8% premium increase seems high. Are you, maybe you could tell me, am I wrong in assuming that? And, or are we, is that increase going to make us potentially look at a cost savings? Do we need to compare rates? I know we did this recently when we regionalized. I don't recall if our rates increased when we regionalized or not, and sort of didn't, we're not going through the town. I'm trying to remember what happened. 8% increase seemed high to me. I would have assumed 3 to 5%, but is that
what they do is we're a member of a large pool, and they look at basically our claims relative to our premiums, and about 85% ratio is break even. This is a nonprofit that's running this too. They're not making money. Ours is significantly above that. 8% is kind of probably more of the norm in recent years for other districts, not for us. We haven't seen this type of figure in my time here. I think the highest we saw was 5 or 6%. So to our district, it is high, even if I know other districts have experienced things like this. I would say it's not entirely unexpected. I think it's something that I've talked to Jeff about. I think we need to look at our healthcare plans. Might not be it's a difficult conversation, but so the vehicle we have to do that is to call our insurance advisory committee together to meet, which is more of an informal group. That would be I think Jeff and I and some members of the union and a couple staff members in non-union positions. So that's a conversation that we'll get that set up and on the calendar. And we'll look at it and we'll share information. I'll also see if I can get any updated information from our health insurance provider. I can always hope that the trends have changed, but I'll get that meeting on the books because, at this point, this is the assumption. So that is something we're going to look at, but as of now, I need to budget what I know, and we'll work to see what we can do. Okay. A big piece of the 105 though is more people participating. That's the larger piece, but still, the 8% affects it affects all 3 schools.
Well, holistically, right? I mean, that's holistic. Yeah. That's a trend that would, in my opinion, would deserve some attention, right?
It has attention.
Participation plus, if we start seeing consistent 8% increase, I mean, it's an area that's gonna need some attention at some point.
Right. I agree, and it will have attention.
Awesome. Thank you.
And the health plans for the staff is July to June, or when is the enrollment periods for the health insurance?
It's July to June, Angela, but changes can be made at any time. They just need to be agreed upon.
I see.
So I think that's the usual time that a change would be made, however. So any more questions on Boylston? No. Berlin is straightforward. Really what's driving is staffing, is the increases in paraprofessional staffing, which is 2 additional positions, plus the contractual increases for the existing staff. There's an increase in teacher salaries, which is their steps, there's lanes, and their 2% increase for cost of living. And the last piece is the conversion of the elementary special ed coordinator position to full-time. Those are the key drivers on Berlin Memorial, which is overall a 3.4% increase.
I have a question, Bob. There's at Berlin Memorial, there's no increase in staff participation in healthcare?
There's not.
That seems peculiar that there was a large number in Boylston and nobody in Berlin. Can you explain that to me?
Not necessarily. I mean, I can tell you what I know is that some people who are not previously enrolled, I think because a family member lost their employment, or I think we also had one position added, at least one position added at Boylston. And we did also, another piece of this is that Berlin, the amount that was budgeted last year had factored in some growth that didn't materialize. So we had that to cover some of the increase for one person.
Okay.
So there was a higher, a piece of that was that there was a higher baseline already in Berlin.
Okay.
It seemed like every new position we had in Boylston enrolled in the plans, which is their right, but usually is not the trend. And Tohonto's were the more significant increases, 6.5%. What's driving it really is a few things. The largest being an increase in special education out of district tuitions. We've had new needs identified, whether it be existing students or student moving in to the district, that's driving that amount. And it's really kind of pushing the increase to where it is. The 148,000 for teacher salaries is contractual, includes steps in lanes and in the cost of living increase of 2%. The health insurance costs at Tohonto is pretty much all related to the premium rate increases, 69,000. And again, you know, we are going to be looking at that. The $88,000 increase in transportation costs is mostly special ed transportation. That is also linked to, you might recall that we presented on Boylston a reduction in special education transportation. There is a student that moved up from Boylston to Tohonto, so that's moved from one budget to the other. The last piece is an increase, again, in medical therapeutic service expenses for OT, PT, speech. You know, we've seen more needs identified in that area. That, you know, can't be covered by the amount of funding we have right now. So Tohonto, again, is at 6.5%. One thing to be aware of is the budget at this point does not include all of the Worcester Regional retirement and pension costs, because Worcester Regional hasn't yet provided the information on the conversion of staff in the elementary schools that became region employees. That's the cafeteria staff, the custodians, and the paraprofessionals. That staff transitioned out of the town's pension obligation and became a pension obligation of the region. But because of the timing and the way that Worcester Regional does their actuarial valuation, we're not going to find out until I think sometime at the end of this month or early January. That's not, I would say that's not an increase to the towns. It'll be an increase to the school budget. But what we're essentially doing here is we'll be shifting expenses that the town used to pay. We'll be shifting them to the school district. It's similar to the comparison I did 2 years ago about healthcare expenses moving out of the town budget and into the regional budget. So I'll present that in February, and I'll show it as a transition item. I will not count it as a cost increase, so we have an apples to apples comparison of what our budget increase is. Does that make sense? The other source of so all the previous budget figures relate to the school committee approving our general fund budget. Another source of funding for the schools that's critical is the funding we get from our revolving funds and grants. We provide this slide every year. I've highlighted some items starting with Boylston School Choice. So you can see kind of a 3-year trend of what our balances are. They're fairly stable in Berlin. Boylston School Choice funds we project to spend down a bit. And to the extent we can, we will try to, if we have any budget savings, reduce our expenditure so we're not drawing it down as much. But at some point, we'll need to reduce our spending of school choice. And what that does is that results in an increase to the general fund budget and an increase in the assessment to the towns. So we're in a time when we need to, we're in a challenging time for the towns. So we do feel like now's not the time to kind of reduce our use of these funds. But once we come out of this this period, we're going to have to look at doing that pretty quickly for Boylston. We're drawing down Tohoto a bit too, but we do have a fairly healthy reserve. We're less concerned about that. Circuit breaker is for special education expenses. It's funding kind of costs of high cost students that have significant costs above the norm for a student. And we typically try to spend the prior year's revenue from circuit breaker. You're allowed to carry over 1 year. So we're going to be drawing that down a little bit more than we normally would, but we still have a safety net. The two that are kind of the most glaring are the preschool program. We have preschool, we are providing services to students on IEPs at preschool age, and that's for free. They're provided free of charge to students. We also have paying students for the preschool program. What we hope to achieve is to break even in the program. There's less paying students attending this year. It's also a challenge in this environment to have as many paying students as you can imagine. So we're essentially drawing that fund down to zero at the end of this year, which, assuming we're back full in next year, shouldn't be an issue. We should be able to continue to fund the core program without putting any of these expenses into our budget. But that's something that, the safety net we've had has been basically been eliminated for preschool. The school lunch program similarly had a healthy surplus. That type of surplus could be used if we had a problem with an oven. Some of this equipment is expensive. We could pay for it out of the school lunch program and not have to go to the towns to pay for it. We have most of the same staff. We didn't replace one position. Basically now it's two. We didn't replace two positions, but they have to pre-package every meal. They need to do a lot of sanitizing of space during COVID-19. So we still have a significant, most of our staff costs. We're serving less meals with about 40% of the students that are normally in school in a normal year. So our revenues are down. So we're significantly drawing down on the school lunch program. Again, if we can get back to full in next year, which is our assumption, we should be okay. But our safety net's been pretty much eroded. And then the other programs are in okay shape. So I just wanted to highlight that. Usually this is a little bit more of a stable situation. And again, this is not a normal year. So I just wanted you to be aware that some of the reserves we've had have been eroded. I think we still have, relative to some other districts, I think we're, in okay shape. I wouldn't say it's fantastic, but I don't think that these are poor positions to be in. Is there any questions on this slide?
Hey,
I had a
Bob.
question. Oh, go
sorry,
ahead, Jim.
No, Angela, go ahead.
I had a question about the free lunch that the schools are doing this
Mhm.
year. Uh, Are we getting some sort of revenue or grant money from the federal government or the states because of all these free?
Yes.
I'm a little confused about that and how
We
this
are.
plays
We
into
wouldn't be
this.
doing, I mean, we wouldn't be able to afford it if we didn't. We're getting about $3. I don't know exactly. It's over $3 per meal, which, and we've tried to market it a bit. I think the response has been limited. I mean, I see it as an opportunity that we'd like to focus on more in the second half of the year. And I've talked to the food service director about that. Particularly the remote meals, but our participation has gone up a little bit recently. But yeah, the meals are free. It would be great if more people took advantage of it. That helps, but still the overwhelming driver of this is the 40% in-person attendance, reducing our revenue. But yes, we are getting $3 and change per meal.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to move on to capital requests. We have a building condition assessment being done at Berlin Memorial School. We've received proposals. That's a pretty comprehensive assessment of our building. That's about 20 years old, and it's going to give us a roadmap for capital for the next 10 to 20 years. The first item is a placeholder anticipating that they're going to identify something during their conditions assessment that we probably should do in the first year. If their report doesn't identify anything, we'll withdraw that from our capital requests. Mr. Campbell has advocated for an electronic sign at the school entrance by South Street to make messages more accessible to staff. This is in line with our goal of better community communication. So that's something I've put on here. And the last one is something we had requested last year, but we deferred, is to do some repairs and restriping of the parking lot. So a total of $68,000 for Berlin Memorial Capital. For Boylston, we have a phone system that's well past its useful life that a vendor will not support. We beg and plead to get them in if we have an issue, and we pay rates. They won't agree to do a maintenance contract. We need to replace it. Families can continue to reach the school. It's just going to stop working at some point. That's $45,000. That's a critical need. And the next item is you might recall well, if anybody's driven to Boylston Elementary, there's a temporary kind of gravel that's been put in to help for drop off and pickup. We've talked to Ace, and he wants to make that permanent for drop off pickup. It's kind of a crowded space out front for parents to do that. We have a estimate. This actually, I should have modified the description. It includes some repairs to the driveway as well, the parking lot. So $20,000 will cover both the temporary section of the driveway and the asphalt repairs to the parking lot. And for Tohoto, the only capital items are the existing bond interest and principal payments. One thing I just want to comment, a note about this is that we are going out to market to refinance the bond. Rates are low, but I'm not going to find out until April what those new numbers are. So I'm going to carry the existing figure that I know what our current debt service schedule is in the budget. And when I get a new figure, I'll update it. I think I'll have it shortly before town meeting. And I'll talk to the town finance officers about it just so they are aware. And if it's not a decrease, we're just going to reject all bids. So it's either going to be a decrease or it's going to be this number. This is a high-level summary by Department of Elementary Secondary Ed's kind of their view of how they look at things. And I don't really have a lot here. It's just, I would just point out that most of the increases are in, you can see a little bit of an uptick in instructional costs, and then the fixed charges is the benefits, and the tuitions, you can see a slight decrease. And the other lines are pretty much the same. These are the categories for your reference. They're in the slides. This shows in the blue our general fund budget. In orange, it's the revolving and grant funds. You know what this shows is that basically, even though our general fund budget's increasing by 5.2%, overall our spending is only increasing by 3.1%. And part of what's driving that is that we have less accessible revolving and grant funds to spend, and we need to reduce our usage of those to help fund our operating budget. So, you know, I think all in all, it presents a fairly modest increase, and we'll see what the town feedback is. Before I jump to questions, one just quick comment is, you know, the towns are facing financial challenges just like we are. So, you know, we're prepared to hear the town feedback. I know this is a difficult time for them. They've lost some commercial revenues. It's unclear what type of support we're going to get from the government, both towns and schools, in the second half of the year. Most of the support they provided expires in December. So that may impact, you know, their ability to support the budget. But I've talked to Jeff, and he and I are going to continue to work on seeing what we can do to address some of the items in here that we might be able to reduce, including the healthcare costs. So while it's a level service budget, you know, we do recognize it's still a challenging year for the towns, and we'll see where they stand with respect to our request. Is there any questions folks have?
Yeah, Bob, just one comment, just a reminder, obviously, the success of getting that, particularly in Boylston, that budget done last year, the early and often, and I know you referenced it in, like, I think your first or second slide there, the communication with, you know, the finance groups in the towns, particularly. Just want to reiterate, you know, obviously last year the success was based on that early communication and consistent communication with well, at least I know from the Boylston side. And I just want to remind you that obviously we've heard from the Berlin side, and they're expecting or asking for, or would like some earlier and more consistent communication as well too, right? So just, you know, just want to remind you and encourage you, and whatever help you need, at least I can help on the Boylston side from starting that process. I don't think you need my help, but earlier is better.
Yeah, no, understood. I typically present this first to the school committee, and then I will share it. So I'll be sending this to them tomorrow, and we'll offer to meet with them as we typically do, and we'll, you know, work to be able to kind of meet their schedule. You know, it might need to be a remote meeting, but, you know, we can figure that out.
Bob, in the past, members of the town government were present at this December meeting and saw your initial budget presentation. I particularly remember last year there was several people sitting behind me when I was chairing this meeting. Do we know if anybody here is here tonight from the town?
I can look at the attendee group. I actually, I don't know if I can see that from the screen I'm on.
Okay. Because, you know, I mentioned this in response to the comments about early communication. And I know that last year in particular, I'm pretty sure the year before, every year that I was the chair, there were members of the finance committee and or the town managers were at this meeting.
Yeah, Cliff, I'll take your word for it. I know that this meeting doesn't give them as much meeting information as the second meeting because the assessments aren't in this information.
Right.
And I know that I've seen people at the second meeting. I remember last year, that's the one Boylston attended. But I certainly share this and offer to meet or address any questions. And I've talked to Buzz Harris on the FinCom in Berlin in the last couple of years. I know before that, Scott Hawkins. So, I'm accessible and I think they're all comfortable reaching out to me, but I'll also proactively invite them to reach out to me and share this presentation. And I'll copy Jeff and we'll be ready to have a dialogue with him.
Yeah, the two people you mentioned on the Berlin Finance Committee, neither of them I think is on it anymore. I think Stan Rogolinsky is the chair, but I could be wrong about that.
No, you're right. It was Stan last year. It was Buzz the year before.
Okay.
Yeah, Buzz isn't on it anymore.
Yeah.
I don't believe.
Well, thanks, Bob. It's a good presentation as always.
Yeah, I will also add that there's a lot of uncertainty this year, particularly. It's a little, last year it was, it's a little bit easier to forecast things. There's so many moving parts right now. If we are, operating in the second half of the year, we've had federal grant funds, it's a couple $100,000 to offset a lot of the additional costs we've had in this COVID environment the first half of the year. It's not clear whether we're going to have any funding. There's a small amount of funding left over that we can spend. It's less than 15,000. So there are a lot of variables. And I'm hoping by February's open budget presentation, there'll be more clarity because it's kind of like throwing at a moving dartboard right now. And it's not the way we typically operate. And I can forecast a lot on the expense side, but the revenue side can impact the budget as well.
Hey, Bob, I just have a quick question. This may be a silly question, but for the food, the breakfast thing that you said, basically you get $3, is that what it is from the state?
$3 for lunch and breakfast is less. I don't know that one off the top of my head, but it's closer to $1. Okay.
Well, you said that people aren't utilizing it, right?
Well, yeah, not as much as they could.
Where does that money go?
If we get it from the state and it goes into a food service revolving fund that pays for the staff and pays for the food that we purchase.
Okay. Yeah, I just curious. I just didn't know if you had sent an invoice or if it's there for use for, I don't know. I was just thinking like that money could be donated to food banks. I know that's probably a silly question, but anyways.
Yeah, no, we're not allowed to donate our food service funds to food banks.
Like I said, I thought it was a silly question.
No, it's no questions are. Families, there's a huge amount of food insecurity right now.
That's why I asked you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
Yep. You're welcome. There's no more questions. I'll close the presentation.
Any other questions for Bob? Okay, anything else you need to touch on, Bob, this evening?
No, just when you get to the point to vote, I would just recommend that you vote vote to approve the presentation as presented, the budget as presented. So you don't need to recite the numbers.
Okay, item number 7 is policy subcommittee. Susan?
I think what's there is pretty straightforward. This is a second look at for technology policies that were updated in very minor ways. did spend some time, the leadership team in particular spent some time reviewing those and identified only small revisions. So unless anybody has any questions, I think that's pretty straightforward, those 4 policies.
Any questions for Susan as it relates to the 4 policies we'll be voting on during business items? Okay. All right, section item 8 is any school committee goals updates that we have. Goal 1, Angela or Lori?
I just want to say that I added both of the goals to the school committee handbook at the end. And for our onboarding goal, Jim, I do need you to appoint a mentor as part of our new process for Mike. I suppose you could do that at the January meeting. But I think all the steps that we want him to do are kind of listed out in that goal.
And Angela, will you and Lori meet with that mentor ahead of time to kind of prepare them, or how does that work?
How do we meet with the mentor ahead of time? Well,
to really understand their role.
Oh, I think we specified certain steps for the mentor to do this year, like reinforce the trainings, making sure they have access to the trainings, know where to go, that sort of thing, and making sure that they set up. I know one of the steps is to talk to either you or Lori from the superintendent evaluation team about that process. Just is more like a person to kind of guide their doing all the things.
So those things are all listed in the
It's in the goal.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I also spoke to Christy and asked, I struggle sometimes with finding things. I mean, in the handbook, I created a lot of links to everything, but I did speak to Christy about, I love how our packet material is organized on the drive. It's easy to find, it's easy to access. And I asked Christy if it's possible to have some sort of folder for the important school committee things, such as the superintendent evaluation works documents, the regionalization agreement, the handbook, the school committee handbook, the contracts, the working calendar, things that we need to refer to a lot, or you have a question about.
Yeah.
I just struggle to find those sort of things. So I thought if we had a central location that would help the new committee member as well as the rest of us.
Yeah.
Finding what we need.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
Christy was really nice about it, and she felt like it wouldn't be too big of a deal to put together an organized folder for us for those important documents.
Good suggestion.
So thank you, Christy.
So I think what we'll do is we'll appoint a mentor at our next meeting. And what I'll ask is, I'll first ask if we have any volunteers at our next meeting. And so we'll cover that then. But you did just get me thinking, just sort of, I don't want to get too far off topic. I already notified this evening Eloise that Mike will be coming after January 1st to be sworn in. It'll be important, Mike, at that time for you to notify us once you are sworn in. And if Paul is still listening, Paul at that point will need to ensure that he has an email and access to all of that, the shared drive set up at that point, because he won't be able to get any of the stuff we're talking about unless that is set up. So once Mike notifies us, I'll notify you that he's been sworn in and he can be provided that stuff.
Well,
Jim, oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, Christy started that process already. We'll probably start the process and have it there available. We just won't activate stuff until we get word from you that it's been that he's been sworn in.
Of course, Christy started the process because she's unbelievable and she kicks butt. So why would I even question that? But okay.
Jim, I think it would be helpful if it's possible for you to identify who you want to appoint before that meeting so that person has a heads up, because technically it would be best to have that person supporting Mike and entering that first meeting, preparing for that, making sure they have access, blah, blah, blah. And so I think supporting him for that first meeting would be useful. So if that person knows ahead of time, they can prepare and go ahead and start working with him, and you can officially appoint them at that meeting. This is a better way to make sure Mike is comfortable on that first session.
Yeah, it's an excellent thought. I don't know. I don't know if I have an answer to that. I'm wondering if I just temporarily act as mentor until that period of time, and maybe I just nominate myself at that point. We'll see. But I think maybe I'll just, as chair, get through the preliminary procedures and getting them all set up and doing all that like you're talking about, and get to that point, and then we can discuss it in January.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to handle it, Jim.
I think that's
Perfect. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. All right. Keith, do we have any updates? I know I do not have any update as it relates to goal number 2, but Keith, do you have any updates?
No, I don't have any updates. Oh, geez, my video was off. Sorry, guys. Not like you guys really want to see me anyway. But, no, I don't have any updates. I'll touch base with Jeff this week and set up a schedule moving forward, and hopefully I'll be able to have more discussion about it at the next meeting, and obviously with Jim as well. So that's all I have for right now.
Yeah, one of the things I need to think about, and I don't want to keep us going too much longer here. One of the things I need to think about, we all need to think about too, is will I be slotting Mike into the positions Cliff was holding, and or should we be deliberating or having any conversation about making any changes to where that is based on Mike being new and where he'll get the best experience, and where he might gain the most value, right? So I want to think about that. I need to think about that as well, and that might help align a mentor as well too. So
can I make a recommendation about that?
Would love your recommendation, Cliff.
I think the policy subcommittee is a good place for someone to get their feet wet, because it's the basis of so much of what we do. And also because it's so broad as well, you begin to get the sense of the scope and the scale of what it is the school committee does. It's just a personal recommendation. You can do with it what you wish.
Yeah, Cliff, I agree with that. I found it helpful as a newcomer to the committee to land on policy. And as in addition to that, they have close, sort of almost one-on-one time getting to know Jeff, because Jeff is part of that meeting. And that's an important piece too, is building a relationship with the superintendent.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I'm going to say this carefully because I'm not looking for a job. But is it possible that a recently former school committee member could be a mentor?
They'd have to have access to the shared drive and stuff, probably.
Probably.
I mean, that's not this. I don't know that anything prevents them from having that. I don't know.
I don't know that either. But I'm just thinking that everyone on the committee is busy in multiple ways. So when Angela retires, I think she'd be a good mentor.
Ah!
Is that how you do it?
That was smooth.
Yeah, thanks.
I think Angela's going self though. That's going to be a long distance mentorship. Yeah. Yeah. So I think all those things are good things to take into consideration. If it wasn't 9:30, I would love to continue to have the conversation about it.
Yeah, I understand.
As it relates to moving us forward. I'll handle the logistic aspects of the mentorship. To be quite honest with you, I expect and I hope Mike reaches out to everybody, and everybody will be somewhat of a mentor in one way or another as we move forward. I agree with Cliff, your sentiments as it relates to policy subcommittee. Some of the other things I think about though is others who haven't spent time on policy subcommittee and preparing and having the right overlay and balance as we eventually have ideas of transitioning Susan away from policy subcommittee and giving others time on there. And so, you think about superintendent evaluations and kind of the way that we were handling that with Lori eventually taking over the lead next year and kind of having a process in place. Just some of the things in the back of my mind I'm thinking about, but I don't disagree with that. So food for thought, but I'll handle logistics of it as we move forward between the 1st and the 12th. And then we can, when it's 6:45, we can have that discussion in a month. Okay. Business items. Let's get our voting underway.
We have superintendent evaluation number 9.
Oh, I didn't even see that. I apologize. My bad.
You guys too, goal 2. Did you have anything for goal 2?
No, we did not. We didn't have any updates this.
All right, I just have a very brief update. Next January is the superintendent's mid-cycle report on goals. And Lori and I will have an updated superintendent guidance notebook ready for everybody. You'll have those before that meeting is what we're aiming for. And Cliff has agreed kindly to complete the evaluation form for the fall semester since he's stepping off. He will not rate the superintendent, but he will provide feedback on the superintendent's goals and standards of leadership for the fall semester, and we will fold those comments into the final report. And that's it.
Okay. So he's not going to do any. Cliff won't do any ratings.
No, I think we had said before it wouldn't really be fair because he's not here for the spring performance and the spring report out. So it wouldn't actually be a fair rating, overall rating.
I thought we had agreed the other way, but.
Oh, I don't have any record of that. Jeff, you can weigh in on this, but it seems to me that if somebody's not here they're not on the committee anymore. So for example, Mike will be evaluating Jeff based on the 6 months that he'll have observing his performance. But Cliff won't be here for those 6 months. So I'm not sure how he could evaluate Jeff without 6 months of observation. Cliff, you might have something to say too.
Only that I'm willing to do whatever the committee would like.
Jeff, you have thoughts about this?
And no, I don't. I think this is something we checked with Russ on, and we probably should. It's probably something we should go back to Russ on and see what the rules are on it.
I thought Dorothy said. I thought we had this conversation with Dorothy, and it was her recommendation.
Russ, I think. I just can't remember what he said.
No, I believe there was a conversation with Dorothy, and
I thought her recommendation was for him to provide his feedback and ratings based on his time spent in that particular year.
I think what she said was that the committee can decide to invite someone to participate because they were on the committee for a part of the year, but it is the committee's decision whether or not to do that. And that it should be a consistent policy, you know, that you can't change your approach
Right.
on a whim. The committee has to decide what they want to do about that, and then it has to be consistently applied. I believe that's what she said.
And I think
I
that,
think that,
I think we made a recommendation to the school committee last year when we discussed this, or was it this year? I can go back and check their records, emails and so on that I have on this topic and follow up with Dorothy if I don't find a record of that transaction. I think it was probably in an email, actually.
I think the committee should also check with Russ, because I know there was a proposal originally that if somebody was on for a certain amount of time, that they wouldn't be allowed to participate, and Russ said it was illegal. And I
Yeah.
definitely remember that. So there may have been a
I remember
conversation with Dorothy, but there was definitely one with Russ.
Yeah, no, the bit with Russ, I think, was that anybody who is on the committee currently, no matter how long they've been on, let's say they came on in May and we're doing an evaluation in June, they're still participating in that. They can choose not to fill out the evaluation completely, but they're entitled to complete that evaluation even with say a month's experience with the superintendent. But
Yeah, that was the conversation with
Yeah,
Russ.
that's true.
It was more, the conversation was Russ was more under the Mike scenario than it was the Cliff scenario. Yeah. Yep.
so why don't I go back and check my emails from Dorothy and get her information on that, and also check our superintendent evaluation minutes to see if when and that was presented to the board or whatever. Let me get back, because it doesn't have to be done right away. I mean, what I'd like for Cliff to do is go ahead and complete at least the narrative portion. And then if we decide in January, so I could put this on the agenda for January, if we decide in January that we also want him to complete the ratings, then he can do that at that time. Would that work?
That's not up to me.
Yeah, I mean, my concern mostly is that we get the narrative portion from Cliff sooner rather than later, while things are fresh and he has access to the shared drive if he needs anything there.
Yeah, I'll confirm with, I'll reach out to both Russ and Dorothy tomorrow. But I agree with you on the narrative part.
Okay, well, would you copy me or something on that so that I'm in the loop as to that conversation?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Whew. All right, let us get through our voting section here so we can conclude this evening. All right, could I please have a motion to approve the initial BBRSD FY22 budget as presented by Bob this evening?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favor, Angela?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Could I please have a motion to approve updates to policy IJND, access to digital resources?
So moved.
I second that.
Questions, deliberations? Hearing none. Angela?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Could I please have a motion to approve updates to policy IJNDB, technology acceptable use?
So moved.
I'll second.
Questions? Hearing none. Angela,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Cliff,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Keith.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Could I please have a motion to approve updates to policy IJNDC internet publication?
So moved.
A second.
Questions? Hearing none. Angela,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Cliff,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Keith.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Could I please have a motion to approve updates to policy IJNDD social networking?
So moved.
A second.
Thank you. Questions? Hearing none. Angela,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Cliff,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Keith.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Could I please have a motion to approve Shannon Kelleher to be a student teacher under the supervision of Beverly Fletcher at BES?
So moved.
Second, anybody?
Second.
I'll second.
I heard Keith. Thank you. Questions?
Sorry, Lori.
Questions? Deliberation? Hearing none. Angela,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Cliff,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Keith.
Aye.
It's an aye for me as well. Could I please have a motion to approve Francesca Cavallo, who is a current employee, to be a student teacher under the supervision of Alfred Thompson for her special education practicum?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you both. Questions? Hearing none. Angela,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Cliff,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Keith.
Aye.
It's an aye for me as well. Could I please have a motion to accept the donation from the Tohoto class of 2018 in the amount of $1,821.99?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Just a question about that. Yeah, I think the letter said it was for the sign, to be used for the sign. Did I read that correctly?
That is what the letter said. Yep.
So does that commit those funds? I'm not sure to what sign that is, but does that commit those funds to that project?
I will have to ask Diane on that.
I can answer that. So for the past, I believe it is close to 3 years, we have been collecting funds, and we finally have enough funds to erect an electronic sign outside of Tohoto. And so classes, as well as a significant donation from Stop and Shop several years ago, has allowed us to do that.
Okay.
The construction will, the sign is currently being produced now, and probably the granite posts will be going in now with the storm coming, probably not until the spring.
So it's your intention to use the funds for the purpose that's stated in the letter?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, just to be clear, that's not an option. If they stated that, we have to have them change the letter if we want to use it for something else. We have to follow what somebody's specified use is.
Good. Thank you for clarifying.
It also looks like Mr. Thompson will be behind on the electric sign.
Yeah. Pressure.
Huh? Looks like we know what's going on the capital improvement next year.
You beat me to it.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none. Angela,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Cliff,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Keith.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. There was a first draft of the school committee annual report dropped into your share drive. It is missing a couple pieces of information. One of the decisions that we made in the past, we would send a school committee report. We would send the principals for each school would send a report. What we're going to do, Christy and I talked about this we're going to just consolidate the reports. We're a district now. We're going to present as a district. We're going to provide our report as a district. So each year the principals will obviously provide their updates however they want to phrase the word. Then it'll just be added to our report. The only I have Mr. Thompson's and John's. We're just waiting on Diane's, but that's okay because we've got some time. And once we get those together, and then I'm just going to be making one probably little update to the final section of the budget, the initial budget. I got to change like percentages from last year. I didn't get to fix that before Bob dropped the budget into the folder yesterday. So I just got to update that. But other than that, those are the only two changes that'll be made. They are due January 15th. So the good news is we'll be able to vote on them in our January 12th meeting and get them in on time this year.
And where does Jeff's report go?
Traditionally, Jeff has not been responsible for a report.
Really? Really?
Yep. As far as I know.
Is that right, Jeff? Jeff, you're on mute.
I have a report.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I would have thought there would be a report from the superintendent. So I don't understand where does that go then? Because I would think the school reports would go under the district reports.
Yeah, we'll have to. I'll have to talk to Christy and Jeff about that and see where they want to put that.
And also, can someone clarify for me? I should know this from looking at all these town reports, but the 20, this is for 2020, right? So most every other committee in town is writing a report from January to January, but the school year is split. So is this report supposed to be running about the schools January to January, or 2019 to 20, or 2020 to 21? I'm not certain what the framing is. I see Carol nodding her head.
I always understood it was a January to January. Is that what the rest of the group too? Yeah, it seems odd because we're only writing about
right
halfway through our school year, but that's historically how we've done it.
So January to January. It's there. I felt like there was work to be done on this report still. I didn't get a sense of accomplishments for the school committee or that there was a pandemic going on until I read the principal's reports. And even that was uneven a little bit, but in terms of our own portion of that report, it seems significant to be talking about the fact that there's a pandemic impacting the district and what our achievements have been in managing that.
Am I hearing you volunteering to adapt? And
I am not. I worked on this last year. I'd
Oh.
love to see somebody else work on it this year. But I'm giving some, feedback on what we're submitting.
I mean, I'll take committee consensus. My goal was to streamline it, to be quite honest with you. Since I've joined, our report back to the town has been, in my opinion, these days far more extensive than prior to my joining. I mean, I remember some of the reports my first couple of years when we had to do them individually as town, and they were a paragraph or two, right?
I think we have to think what as a town resident and taxpayer do you want to learn from the school committee's report? And it seems to me some high level comments on achievements and context for that year are important. Also, there is editing that needs to be done in this report.
So what are you suggesting, Susan?
It's somebody needs to do another pass on it, or to assist in some way.
I'll assist. I'll do a pass on it because I noticed some of the things you're talking about. So maybe I can help with the draft.
And does Christy or anybody do a final proofread on this? Or can she? Isn't she
I
like
don't-
executive secretary for the school committee?
I don't recommend us asking Christy to do a final review of it, but I think Christy's busy enough.
Well, I can do a final edit, but I don't want to do the, substantive revision work. I mean, I can proofread it at the very end before it's ready. If that's helpful, that's up to you, Angela.
Yeah, I think that's fine. If I help Jim tweak it, I'll do some tweaking to it. You can proofread it and then we'll send out the second read.
Okay.
For the January meeting. How's that?
It's fine with me. I don't know how Cliff or Keith or Lori feel about that, about, what I'm saying.
I think that Cliff, Keith, and Lori can send Jim their comments or suggestions. Because we can't deliberate between now and then, but that way we can get their input into it. How, individually to Jim's. Does that work?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Future agenda, obviously our next meeting is the 12th. So we should have that on the calendar. Mike, that'll be your first meeting. Traditionally, Mike, our meetings do not go 3.5, 4 hours.
Oh, Jimmy, you're lying.
Or they shouldn't. And if we have other meetings like this, then obviously we need to do some adjusting to our agendas and processes. They shouldn't take this long. So, okay, with that being said, do I have, can I have a motion?
Can I say one thing?
Yep.
Cliff, I just think we got to give him a round of applause. We didn't give that before.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're all very kind. I'm gonna miss you all.
Miss
I don't-
you.
We would have done that in person. I know it's weird through Zoom, but
No, it is not weird through Zoom. Life is through Zoom these days. Yeah, it's normal.
all right.
I want to thank Jim for holding possibly the longest meeting we've ever had on my last meeting.
Well, part of it was so long was all our nice comments to you.
Yes.
Cut those out. We could cut out a half hour.
So I'm the culprit. Okay, I take full responsibility for that.
Yeah. First 45 minutes, buddy.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Could I please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second that.
All right. Thank you. Angela,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Cliff,
I say no. No, I.
Yeah, great.
Lori. Lori.
Oh, sorry, I was distracted.
Keith.
All right.
I'm an aye as well. Thank you, everybody.